Chapter 1599. That day, on the eve of the darkest dawn of the night, the entire city lord mansion had been destroyed in the great battle. Broken walls and broken corpses littered the ground, most of them broken and incomplete. The earth was dyed red, and the air was filled with the thick scent of blood. Within the iron cage inscribed with talismans, Qin Yuanqin's hair was disheveled and his limbs were broken. 2 thick black chains had pierced through his shoulder blades, imprisoning his cultivation. Blood flowed from his wounds, constantly dripping to the ground through the gaps in his armor. This traitor was actually still alive. This was indeed something that surpassed everyone's expectations. After all, compared to being escorted to the capital and being judged by the great emperor, it would have been far better to commit suicide. At least he would have suffered less physical pain and would have preserved some of his face from when he was alive. But a living traitor was far more meritorious than a corpse. Since Qin Yuanqin didn't have the courage to commit suicide, the meritorious officials in the city were naturally satisfied. They had already investigated everything, and all the evidence was conclusive. Qin Yuanqin's treason had become an ironclad case. Only like this could they feel at ease sending him to the capital. Otherwise, if something went wrong, not only would they not have earned any merit, but they would also be shamed. Escort the traitor to the capital, set out. The Marquis of Guichi had an excited expression. He roared out loud and brandished the saber in his hands, his face filled with high spirits. He never imagined that one day he would be able to personally place Qin Yuanqin, who had never looked him in the eye, into a cage used to transport serious criminals. It was truly a joyous event. The carriage pulling the cage slowly drove out of the ruins of the city lord mansion. At this time, the thick darkness above was rapidly fading away. The 9 suns rose, dispersing the darkness of the world. Numb faces slowly appeared on both sides of the road. They saw Qin Yuanqin imprisoned in the iron cage. Their faces twisted and they clenched their teeth, revealing endless resentment. Their homes were mostly located around the city lord mansion. After being affected by the previous rebellion, they had been smashed to pieces. Every one of them had lost countless family members and loved ones. Towards Qin Yuanqin, who had caused all of this, after a brief moment of disbelief, they were filled with deep resentment. "You dog thief, return my daughter!" "Qin Yuanqin, you will die a horrible death. I curse your Qin family to be exterminated to the 9th generation." Bang! A rock smashed heavily into Qin Yuanqin's forehead, tearing open the wound and causing blood to flow out. The crowd fell silent. Seeing that the escorting soldiers didn't say anything, pieces of rubble, eggs, mud, feces fell from the sky. They wished they could tear the high and mighty city lord into pieces on the spot. Qin Yuanqin's body was still curled up, protecting his vitals without moving. Behind the surging tide of people, a window near the street quietly opened a crack. A pair of eyes looked at the scene before them, and their eyes quickly turned red. As he panted heavily, he reached out to grab the window. "If you want to die, you can jump out. But if you do that, you will be letting down everything your father has done." Li Ruhua sat on the chair, holding a teacup in her hand as she spoke slowly. Her voice was extremely cold and emotionless. Qin Shangol's body trembled and his eyes were bloodshot. He didn't turn his head as he roared, "Save him, you can do it. I am willing to pay any price." Li Ruhua took a sip of tea, her tone even colder. "Your life was saved by me to begin with, so the current you has no qualifications to discuss conditions with me." She put down the teacup. After a moment of silence, her tone softened. "You should know that the reason your father chose to take this step was to exchange his own life for your survival. And I cannot save him." At this time, within the iron cage, Qin Shangol suddenly looked up. In his calm and wooden eyes, there was a trace of gratification. Then he shook his head in an imperceptible but firm manner. The procession gradually moved away. The crowd on the street also followed. After the chaos, the silence made it easy for one to fall into a trance. Chinshangle fell backwards. He lay on the ground like a piece of dead wood. His eyes closed as tears of blood flowed down his cheeks. Cry, consider this a farewell for your father. I underestimated this, Chen Yuanshin. But you must remember that the reason your father ended up in this situation is all because of the loyal marshal, Marquis Ningqin. It was because of him that your father had to take this step in order to allow you to live. Li Ruhua walked over to his side and knelt beside his ear, speaking in a soft voice. Her voice was calm and serene, like a stream that flowed into Chen Shangle's fierce and cruel heart that wished to destroy everything. Loyal Marshal Marquis Ningqin. Loyal Marshal Marquis Ningqin. Loyal Marshal Marquis Ningqin. He whispered again and again, his tears of blood falling without end. In the ruins of the city lord mansion, little Meaty stood in the shadows. From start to finish, she had been here, but no one had been able to see her. At this time, she looked up at the window that had opened a crack, her expression light. Mo's eyes were icy cold. The reason why she wasn't worried about the cooperation between the Western Wasteland and the Li family was simple. After leaving the Western Wasteland imperial capital, she would have no scruples. As long as she killed the two people in the room, the cooperation would collapse. Moreover, what Li Ruhua was doing now had caused little Meaty's killing intent to rise even higher. The corners of her lips curved up in a diabolical smile. She was really cruel and cruel. This wasn't just empty words. Killing someone was an extremely simple matter. Only Qinyu was different. So what if he was the third generation of the Li family? So what if he killed them? Would he be able to find her? Taking a step back, even if he really did find her, would she be afraid? They were nothing more than a bunch of snacks delivered to her on their own initiative. She lifted a hand. The darkness around little Meaty's fingertips suddenly thickened. It was like a monster had silently appeared, opening its mouth as if it wanted to swallow everything in the world. Within the room, Li Ruhua's complexion changed. The red spot on her palm seemed to ignite, emitting an intense, burning pain. Without any hesitation, she reached out and grabbed Qinshanglu. With a shout, the two of them vanished from sight. Little Meaty's eyebrows arched up. She maintained the posture of her fingertips and frowned, revealing a helpless expression. How annoying. Why did you stop me? Provocation? Can this be considered a provocation? Can't you be a bit more reasonable? I'm just pinching two little bugs to death. Is there a need to make it sound so serious? Fine. If you say you won't kill them, then you won't kill them. Can you not be so hostile? For better or worse, we have been neighbors for many years. Humph, I understand. I will go back earlier. Stop nagging me to death. She turned and left. Her eyes darkened and an icy cold ruthlessness surged within them. Swish, little Meaty disappeared into the darkness. Your Majesty, I don't understand. The sky-bearing king frowned and said with a worried expression. He and Chen Yuanshin weren't close, but they had some dealings. Otherwise, true Saint Baiyu wouldn't have taken the initiative to visit him. The sky-bearing king thought that he had some understanding of Chen Yuanshin. He was a smart person and wouldn't do such a stupid thing. Rebellion? What a joke! Unless there was a great change in the world and there was a calamity, no one could shake the rule of Imperial Zhou. Chen Yuanshin's rebellion was more like he was asking for death. The escort team had already arrived at the capital region. After the Imperial Guard verified Chen Yuanshin's identity, they were putting him in prison to await trial. But everyone knew that Chen Yuanshin, who had been detained in the imperial capital, was destined to die. The so-called trial was just a formality. But the worry on the sky-bearing king's face wasn't because of Chen Yuanshin. The city lord of a main city could be considered a high position. If he was killed because of rebellion, if this matter wasn't handled well, it would cause turmoil in the court. Above the 9 heavens, behind the bead curtain, The great emperor's expression was calm. Chen Yuanqin is seeking death. He came to the imperial capital alive to vent his anger on me, to protect his son who was sent to the Li family in the central wasteland. After a moment of silence, the emperor coldly sneered. Chen Yuanqin understands me, but he underestimated my breadth of mind. But I will still fulfill his wish and give Qin Shanglu a chance to live. The sky-bearing king bowed. Your Majesty is magnanimous. The emperor waved his hand. Go, tell the Ministry of Justice that there is no need to investigate anymore. Give Qin Yuanqin a quick death. After all, he once ruled a main city of the western wasteland. He cannot be humiliated. The sky-bearing king bowed once more and left the hall, sighing. His Majesty was still as hypocritical as ever. But giving Qin Yuanqin a quick death was also a rare act of mercy. Shaking his head, he gathered his thoughts and went straight to the prison. When Marquis Zhongwu's carriages left the station, there was another person. A pale-faced Li Gu was hiding in one of the carriages. His eyes were closed and his aura was faint. His sword Dao had already been destroyed, severed by the Joss Flame artifact, his cultivation almost severed. But for some reason he was so weak that he seemed like he could be blown away by a gust of wind. Yet he gave off a dangerous feeling. Maid Baiji was also in this carriage. She wore a white robe that covered her entire body, revealing only her eyes. Before they left, she was driven out by Ruru. Although her expression was calm, she was not happy in her heart. Looking at the pale-faced Li Gu, Baiji frowned as a cold glint flashed across her eyes. Why did the Lord take him in? He was just a cripple. Could it be for Marquis Zhongwu? Although the Lord's cultivation was high and she could not guess, it was not an ordinary matter to save such a cripple. It would cause serious damage to himself. Thinking of this, Baiji's eyes became colder. At that moment, Li Gu opened his eyes. His eyes were dim, but extremely sharp. At that moment, he gave Baiji a cold stare. He gave Baiji a feeling that her heart had been seen through. I have no ill intentions towards you. I hope you don't try to kill me. After a moment of silence, Li Gu continued to speak. His voice was slightly hoarse, revealing a heart-palpitating taste of blood. Believe me, although you are strong, if I die, I can take you with me. Baiji's pupils shrank. She wanted to sneer, but her intuition told her that Li Ji's words were true. He did have the ability to drag her down with him. Why? Li Ji's swordsmanship had clearly been broken and his cultivation had been destroyed. He was a cripple. Li Gu closed his eyes and continued to meditate. His current physical condition was very bad. If he wasn't carefully taken care of, he could die at any moment. Across from him, Baiji took a deep breath and suppressed the killing intent in her heart. But this did not mean that she was frightened by Li Gu. On the contrary, Baiji's killing intent never faded. If Li Ji's existence caused any harm to the Lord, she would kill him without hesitation. She would even kill the loyal marshal Marquis Ningqin. So what if they perished together? She was already tired of living. As long as the Lord wasn't harmed, everything was fine. Qin Yu opened his eyes. He hesitated for a moment and said, "Can you not sneer at me like that? I'm a little scared." Across from him, Midi rolled her eyes. "If you don't want to watch, then leave. Did I pull you?" Qin Yu choked for a moment. He changed his position and turned his back to her. He closed his eyes, thinking that these days were really hard to endure. When would it end? But as he thought about it, besides the Western Wasteland great emperor joining forces with the Li family, there was also the fierce tiger from the Yi family that wanted to kill him. What a headache! He feared he could only endure it for a short period of time. Then he would endure it. As a man, he had to be hard when he needed to be hard and soft when he needed to be soft. This was the philosophy of survival. Midi humphed. She looked away and closed her eyes. She thought that a stupid woman was indeed a stupid woman. She took things for granted. Worry about me? Do I need to? This great shaman of Meng Mountain had a high cultivation, but he was a bit blind. Besides a decent swordsman, what use was there in saving him? He might as well die and end all troubles once and for all, lest he implicate others. So, although Meaty kept her by his side as a maid, she didn't try to save her. She might as well take a look first. If she died while looking, then that was because her fate was bad and she couldn't blame anyone else. Or perhaps one day when he was in a good mood, he would casually save her. Outside Sea-Watch City, 10,000 miles away, in a mountain cave, Liruhua slowly opened her eyes. Although she had been meditating for several hours, her complexion was still deathly pale. She looked down at the faint red spots on her palms. As she thought about that aura she could faintly feel, her body shivered. She couldn't suppress the endless fear that gushed out from deep within her. That killing intent, just where did it come from? It was terrifying and boundless, like a surging black sea. A single wave could cover the world. In just an instant, Liruhua felt as if she was in a hopeless situation with no chance of survival. Although she had smoothly borrowed the strength of the red spots to travel through the world and leave Sea-Watch City, Liruhua's intuition told her that it wasn't that the other party didn't have the ability to kill her ahead of time, but for some unknown reason, the owner of that killing intent had suddenly chosen to give up. Otherwise, perhaps she would already be a cold corpse by now. Just who was it? Liruhua took a deep breath and suppressed the shock in her heart. A bitter smile appeared on her face. Before she left the Li family, she had always thought that the world was vast. As long as she didn't provoke those high and mighty characters, she would be safe and sound. She could go anywhere she wanted in the world. In fact, she didn't even think that searching for the new barbarian emperor was a difficult matter. But in just a short period of time, reality had taught her a serious lesson. In the imperial capital, Li Ji's swordsmanship cultivation had been severed because of the nine-tailed monster fox. Now, her whereabouts were unknown, and she didn't know if she would ever see her again. And in Sea-Watch City, she inexplicably encountered a terrifying killing intent and was just inches away from death. Liruhua's complexion changed. She suddenly thought of a possibility. Was the killing intent she felt related to the new barbarian emperor? Before, she had guessed that everything that happened in the imperial capital was a trap. But then she thought of the central, desolate, divine continent and the large sects that competed with each other. But why couldn't this be the barbarian emperor's plot? And this plot itself was to plot against the Li family and also to conceal their line of sight and then protect them. If this was true, then there was only one explanation for the terrifying killing intent she encountered in Sea-Watch City. The barbarian emperor was preventing her from approaching Marquis Zhongwu. At this moment, Liruhua's eyes brightened. Chapter 1600. Liruhua was one of the few people in the world who knew about it. The red spot on her palm was her greatest secret. As for her identity, the Li family had been guarding it to the death. So far, only 2 or 3 people knew about her background. 2 of them were even more elusive. They traveled the world all year round and hadn't shown up in the family for a long time. In the Li family of the Central Wilderness, although Liruhua had a very ordinary name, in fact, she was not ordinary at all. Her status was far above that of the ordinary third-generation disciples. What Liga knew about her was only a little bit more than the surface. In the cave, Liruhua's eyes were bright. She lowered her head and thought for a while. Then she looked across and said, "Chin Shangolv, guard outside." Chen Shangolv opened his eyes. His expression was indifferent and his eyes were calm. However, there was a trace of blood in the deepest part of his eyes that couldn't be erased. Nodding, he got up and left without saying a word. Liruhua raised her hand and spread her fingers, revealing the red spot on her palm. "Heaven fire." As she murmured, she suddenly looked up. Her eyes and long hair turned red at the same time. It was as if a flame was burning, or as if it had been injected with a copious amount of blood. Liruhua's aura changed. It became cold and indifferent, as if she was a god that had descended to the world and regarded all living beings as ants under her feet. She raised her hand and pointed a finger at the void, forming a small world that was completely isolated from the outside world. Limu. A calm voice came out of her mouth. See watching city. When Marquis Zhongwu's convoy stepped into the teleportation array, the several powerful figures in the city finally breathed a sigh of relief. Although Marquis Zhongwu had taken the initiative to refuse the credit they had delivered to him, no one knew if there was something wrong with it. A marquis, who was a general of the army, had great power and status. If he really wanted to do something, it would be hard for them to breathe. Yi Gui was also here. That day, when he left the Yi family, he was already a dead man. Now he was only a wandering ghost with no roots. He wasn't afraid of death, but he had promised the general that he would repay the family with his own death. Therefore, he had been looking for an opportunity. Yi Gui watched as the procession entered the teleportation array, then turned and left. He returned to his residence in the city, where he saw a green jade slip on the table in his room. The material was very ordinary and could only record some simple words. He glanced at it and picked it up. After several breaths of time, he exerted a bit of strength in his fingers, and the jade slip quietly shattered, turning into powder. Yi Gui stood up and respectfully kowtowed 3 times in the direction of the imperial capital. When he stood up again, there was a smile on his face, as if he had been relieved of a great burden. Your Majesty, I still feel that Li Siji's words can't be trusted after he went crazy. It is likely that he is a part of some plan. When you faced Marquis Zhongwu, I can understand that you were cautious because of what he did. But this is still a very risky move. The little eunuch had a rare solemn expression on his face. He bowed as he stood in front of the palace, his tone heavy. What if this is still the scheme of that race and the Central Wasteland's Li family? After all, the loyal Marshal Marquis Ningqin is no longer an ordinary chess piece. Once he is destroyed, His Majesty's entire plan will suffer an irreparable loss. Above the 9 levels, behind the bead curtains, the western wasteland, Great Emperor had a calm expression. Li Zhouqing, with what status are you speaking to me? The little eunuch bowed even lower. He calmly said, I am your Majesty's servant, but I am also a servant of my western wasteland. I have overstepped my boundaries with sincerity. I ask that your Majesty investigate this clearly. Humph! The great Emperor coldly sneered. I don't need you to remind me how to do things. As for the loyal Marshal Marquis Ningqin, I have my own arrangements. As for you, don't forget to continue searching for the whereabouts of civilian residences. As long as that old monster is still within the borders of the Western Wasteland, even if you have to dig 300 feet underground, you must find him. The little eunuch bitterly smiled. He bowed and retreated into the shadows, vanishing from sight. His status? What status? In the shadow world. Beneath the sleeves of the eunuch's robes, he clenched his fists, his nails digging into his flesh. Your Majesty, it isn't that I owe the Emperor clans, but that they owe me far too much. After Seaview City, there was a transmission array that led directly to Blue River City, a strategic location for the Empire's troops. He was conferred the title of Loyal Marshal Marquis and was a great general of the same rank. Of course, this wasn't just a nice title. The military authority in his hands also rose with it. Skybearing King delivered the decree of the Western Wasteland Great Emperor, ordering Qinyu to return. When he arrived at the Western Border Army camp, he also delivered the Tiger Seal to dispatch troops. On the Blue River side, it was clear that they had already received a notice from the military headquarters ahead of time. This time, there was no need for anyone to report to them in order to see the leading figures of Blue River City. This was because ever since they received the imperial decree from the military headquarters, they had been waiting here. Today's loyal Marshal Marquis was naturally different from the golden general of the past. General Zhongshan was still in the crowd, but his ranking was at least 7 or 8. It was clear that when true Saint Baiyu said that he would be in charge of the training of Blue River City's troops, He was trying to flatter Chinyu. In fact, the 20 counties to the east of Blue River City truly did have a territory of over 20 counties. This was the only reason they were able to station tens of millions of troops. This was the #1 strategic location in the entire empire. The one truly in charge of the training of Blue River City's troops was an old general who had retired from the battlefield, Yi Qianqing. That's right, he came from the most ancient Yi family. How could a mountain in the army be just a joke? Even though he only had one leg and one hand left, and they were all replaced by puppets, making it slightly inconvenient for him to walk around, he was still a great figure within Blue River County. Marquis Loyal Marshal, the 400,000 new troops have been prepared. They can leave in 2 days. Yi Qianqing gestured with his hand. Marquis, please follow me to temporarily reorganize. Qin Yu cupped his hands together. I'll have to trouble General Yi. According to the arrangements given by the military headquarters, Blue River City would only stay for 3 days at most. It was clear that they had already made arrangements. Yi Qianqing turned and looked at the caravan behind them. I heard that the madam is also among them, Qin Yu smiled. My madam has a quiet temperament, so there is no need to trouble her. Yi Qianqing nodded, not speaking any further. The group soon arrived at the relay station that Blue River City had prepared ahead of time. The place they were staying at was naturally different from before. Qin Yu didn't care about this, but this caused the restless relay station officials and others to relax and do their best to entertain them. If Blue River went further west, he would no longer be able to use a transmission array to cross the borders of the empire. He would have to ride an airship that transported the army to the border, and that would take around a month. If the Western Wasteland Great Emperor and the Li family wanted to make a move, they should do so during this period of time. After all, if they waited any longer and the airship entered the border army camp, many things would become inconvenient. It was likely that some disturbances would be stirred up in the army. As for these 400,000 new troops, he was still a stranger to the commanding general. There had been no contact between the two sides. As long as he placed several capable people within, once there was a mistake, he could turn the blade around and force the nominal commanding general into a hopeless situation. He wouldn't have to worry about causing too much trouble. Of course, Qin Yu couldn't be completely sure what would happen and whether or not things would reach this step. So he could only patiently wait. Luckily, he didn't feel any fear in his heart, so there was no torment to speak of. He only treated this as a formality. This was the beauty of hugging someone's thigh. If you didn't hug them, you wouldn't know. Whoever hugged them would laugh. This feeling was wonderful. Qin Yu faintly smiled and closed his eyes to cultivate. The incense boy had snuck into the western wastelands, massive incense burning Dao field. This was the same as opening a small opening in a rushing river. Endless amounts of incense burning strength fused into Qin Yu's body. This was equivalent to activating another driving force that could help him improve his cultivation base in addition to his own cultivation. Of course, the effects couldn't be compared to the incense burning strength he received when he made a breakthrough, but it was still considerable. When combined with the gifts of the world he obtained after the darkness in front of him was broken, it was enough to allow him to constantly be in the paradise land that other cultivators yearned for. Although it was a bit exaggerated to say that a single day was equal to a year of cultivation, it was still equal to a month of bitter cultivation for an ordinary person. Qin Yu didn't want to waste even the tiniest bit of cultivation time. Ever since he broke into the ruler realm, he had been diligently cultivating whenever he had time. But the only thing that worried him was that as he cultivated every day and his strength increased, the suppressive feeling of being a fish caught in a net of the heavens and earth was also growing. Little Meaty had said that if the heavens collapsed, the tall ones would hold it up. But why did the heavens collapse? Could the tall ones really hold it up? And what if they couldn't? What would the result be? Qin Yu constantly told himself that he was a cultivator that took 1 or 2 steps at a time. He shouldn't bite off more than he could chew and think about matters that far surpassed his current boundary. But deep in his heart, the worry never dissipated, even if he was hugging onto a very, very thick thigh. This was because Chinyu always felt that the mysterious existence hidden in space-time couldn't hold up the heavens. Not too far away, in another part of the Blue River relay station, Little Meaty looked at Chinyu's cultivation area and gradually frowned. There really was a problem. Just who was Chinyu? The reincarnated body of an almighty being? But there were no traces of reincarnation on his body. Even if Chinyu himself was special and she couldn't recognize him as one of the most special and ancient existences in the world, Little Meaty didn't remember that she owed a favor to some almighty being in the past. She ate several. So, this couldn't explain why she always involuntarily did so many unexpected things when she faced Chinyu. She couldn't control her heart. Little Meaty rubbed her temples. Then her movement stiffened and she drew back her hand with a gloomy expression. She took a deep breath and suppressed her violent mood. Then she looked up into the distance. Her eyes brightened. After several breaths of time, she composed herself. After thinking for a moment, she coldly sneered. "You aren't completely useless. Then I'll let you live a bit longer." She said 2 days, and it really was 2 days. Yi Qianqing led the Blue River relay station. After the 400,000 soldiers paid their respects to their commander, they boarded the airships. They were densely packed, and their numbers were so great that they covered a large portion of the sky and scattered down boundless shadows. It was truly a magnificent sight, a sight that swallowed up mountains and rivers. Not to mention whether or not this 400,000-strong army would one day turn their blades around and chop him, the commander, into pieces. Just the current feeling was really great. The shouts of 400,000 people shook the heavens. In that moment, Chinyu felt what it meant to be a man holding the power of the world in his hands. The power of incense that the incense boy stole also increased. It seemed that there was a deep connection between this and Chinyu's own destiny. "Let's go." Chinyu waved his hand. The surface of the airships lit up with runes of array formations. The air shook and the airships accelerated. They were like giant fish swimming in the deep sea, gradually speeding away. Chapter 1601. Strange things had happened in the Devil's Sect recently. The commotion was so big that it had alerted the higher-ups in the sect. The first incident was about a disciple of a small and unknown sect in the Devil's Sect who suddenly fell into a coma for no reason. When he woke up 2 days later, his cultivation had increased tremendously. He also learned a supernatural power called ocean reversal from somewhere. It had the power to move mountains and drain oceans. It caused the river to flow backwards and drown half of the mountain. A few of his fellow disciples who had bullied him for many years were killed on the spot. It was quite a commotion. The second thing was that in a city there was a son of a rich family. He was born a fool, but after one night he suddenly became enlightened. He was knowledgeable and could speak logically. His relatives were shocked, and they invited an immortal master to perform a ritual at great cost. Finally, it was confirmed that this son of the first wife had not been possessed or possessed. He had really opened his spiritual aperture and obtained great knowledge that was close to talent. If that was the case, it wouldn't have been worth the attention of the Devil Sect. After all, there were countless opportunities in the world. Someone might get it one day and change their fate. This had happened more than once in the history of the Devil Sect. However, the third thing was too shocking. It was a Devil Sect protector who was in seclusion. He was already at the end of his rope and couldn't see any possibility of breaking through. He could only sit there like a piece of dead wood, waiting for death to come. However, one day, a bright light suddenly shone and countless rules appeared. He had actually stepped into the sovereign realm and become a new elder of the Devil Sect. However, after this elder had broken through, his temperament had changed. When the Devil Sect asked him about it, he didn't say a word. In the end, he attacked someone and escaped. The series of accidents attracted the attention of the devil sect. After careful investigation, they found that there were many similar incidents. In fact, in a remote mountain village, everyone in the village was devoured by the demonic beasts. The monster that was caught had an even more bizarre origin. It was actually the guard dog of the village's butcher family. In the past, it had seen many people eat animals. After transforming into a monster, it opened its mouth and ate them all. However, it was clearly an ordinary animal. But after a night, it had directly become a monster with spiritual intelligence. It was truly unimaginable. As the chief of the devil sect, the night demon sect master's eyes grew brighter and brighter as he examined the cases he had received. There was excitement in his eyes. Pass down my orders. Anything that has happened recently is to be suppressed for the time being. Do not spread it out. Leaving behind an order, the night demon sect master turned around and left. Marquis Zhongwu had left the imperial army and was returning to the western border army. He would pass by Green River and incorporate the troops under the great general. This was not a secret. According to the time, the young miss was following Marquis Zhongwu and was not far from the devil sect. Inside the secret chamber, the night demon sect master held the jade slip in his hand. After imprinting the information, he clenched his fist and crushed the entire jade slip. However, the information within the jade slip had already been transmitted through a secret technique. On the airship, Little Meaty, who had occupied a cabin to herself, finally received a message from the devil sect. She glanced at it and found that it was about the same as she had expected. She stood up and left. She found Qinyu, who was always cultivating and cherishing his time. There is a lucky chance that is right in front of you. Do you want it? Although her expression was light and indifferent, as if she didn't care too much about this so-called lucky chance. With Qinyu's understanding of Little Meaty, for her to make such a trip meant that this matter was not ordinary at all. Little Meaty didn't care about it because she was strong and her boundary was deep enough. Even to this day, Qinyu hadn't been able to see through her, but he clearly didn't have the qualifications or confidence to do so. I want it. He blurted out. He could feel the invisible suppression of the great net of heaven and earth. Although the stronger one was, the greater the pressure. Still, he couldn't stop eating for fear of choking. Couldn't go forward. Perhaps the pressure he felt today would be broken one day as his strength grew. Even if it didn't, the stronger he was, the more likely it would be. He could take a look at the scenery of the mountain peak and find a way out. Little Meaty turned and left. Qinyu hurried to follow. A moment later, an order spread through the airship. Many generals revealed strange expressions. They thought that even if Marquis Zhongwu was highly regarded by His Majesty, would nothing happen to him if he did this? I will bring my wife to the demonic sect to visit relatives. We will return soon. The army will continue forward according to the plan. True Saint, Baiyu certainly didn't receive any accurate words. He bitterly smiled, but was powerless to stop them. He could only anxiously respond to the questions coming from the various airships. And at this time, Qinyu and Little Meaty were already on the road to the demonic sect. Cough, we are leaving like this. But I still don't know what the lucky chance is. Qinyu revealed a puzzled look. According to his plan, the two of them could leave without making a sound. All they had to do was find an excuse, and no one would notice them. Why would they make such a big fuss about it, and even spread the excuse that they were returning to the demonic sect to visit relatives? Little Meaty had a calm expression. On the airship, there are 4 old fourth claws bestowed by the Imperial Palace. We can hide it from them for a while, but we will definitely be discovered after a long time. How about we just leave like this? Qinyu frowned. That's it. Little Meaty said, Of course not. The reason we are doing this openly is because the lucky chance within the demonic sect was sent by the Western Wasteland Great Emperor and the Li family together. Since they went through so much trouble and sincerity, you certainly have to appreciate it. It is normal for you to inform Master. Qin Yu's expression turned solemn. He seemed to understand. After a moment of thought, he said, "You still haven't told me what this lucky chance is." Little Meaty thought for a moment. "If I were to tell you seriously, it would be a very complicated and troublesome matter. So, I will change the tone of my storytelling. Just listen." She glanced at Chinyu and saw him nod. She continued to say, "In ancient times, a long, long time ago, there was a strange stone in the world that possessed the supernatural ability to interfere with the flow of time. If that was the case, then it would at most be an extraordinary treasure. If it was refined by someone and passed down for generations, that would be fine. But coincidentally, not long after this stone was born, before anyone could find it, a seed fell onto it. It smoothly sprouted and grew into a great tree." As she spoke of trees, Chinyu thought of Little Meaty's two incomparably mystical trees that were currently nowhere to be found. Her cooking skills were world-shaking. There's no way to compare. The difference between the two is too great. Although my two trees have a bit of an origin, the difference in rank is too great. Even if 10,000 years passed, 100,000 years passed, it would still be impossible for them to compare. In short, a great tree grew out of the stone. It was similar to a treasure forming a happy marriage with another treasure. Well, of course, it might have been forced, but the ending wasn't bad. A truly wondrous object was born. A moment later, Chinyu's eyes widened and a look of praise appeared on his face. He thought that the world was vast and there were truly all sorts of strange things. It was actually able to naturally give birth to such a wondrous object. The large stone was named Grandeur. The great tree was called Golden Millet. This Grandeur stone had a golden millet tree growing on it. When the two were placed together, it was called Grandeur's Dream. Golden Millet, half a life. If any living being of the world were to step into it, they would gain another life. Everything they obtained could be directly fed back to their main body. Thus, there was the phrase reaching the heavens in a single bound. There was also the phrase suddenly a spring breeze comes, thousands of pear blossoms bloom. There was also the phrase hearing the great Tao in the morning, chickens and dogs ascend to heaven. There were so many things in the world that one could find their roots in. After thinking for a long time, Chinyu's eyes brightened with anticipation. Then he suddenly thought of something, and his complexion changed. "You've said so much. Grandeur descends into Golden Millet Dream. But not just anyone can enter." Little Meaty glanced at him and coldly coughed. "Since I allowed you to come, I naturally have a way. Just wait." Chinyu nodded. But just as he began to move, he suddenly felt a wave of weariness wash over him. His eyelids ached unbearably. Before he could even react, his body slumped and he fell into a deep sleep. Little Meaty turned and reached out a hand. She hugged Chinyu, a look of disdain on her face. From her expression, it seemed she had already expected this. At this time, Little Meaty furrowed her eyebrows and a cold intent appeared in her eyes. "You reckless thing, get back here." As her voice fell, even though she clearly hadn't done anything, space began to twist and a powerful repulsive force burst out from within. With a dull bang, it seemed as if something was forcefully jolted away. Shwa! Little Meaty stepped forwards and vanished from sight. In the next moment, she arrived at a courtyard within the demonic sect. The night demon sect master sensed something and appeared out of thin air. His face lit up with joy. He bowed and said, "This old servant greets the miss." Little Meaty nodded. She lightly said, "I want to borrow this courtyard for a period of time to download the 31 app. Stand guard outside and don't allow anyone to enter." Her words were impolite, but the dignified peak ruler knight demon sect master, the chief disciple of the demonic sect, didn't seem angry at all. Instead, he respectfully bowed. He didn't even ask why. He turned and left, completely activating the defensive array formation and blocking out his own sense. Then he stood guard at the entrance of the courtyard, motionless. Little Meaty turned and walked away, as if she were very familiar with this place. She activated a mechanism and passed through several trap arrays and killing arrays, arriving at an underground chamber. After placing Qin Yu on a cushion on the ground, Little Meaty walked to a corner of the chamber. She swept her eyes around and sneered. "Since you know I'm here, why haven't you appeared on your own initiative? Do you want me to capture you?" Hum! With a light tremble, space shook and a tablet appeared. Fog lingered above it, condensing into a little person. He revealed a look of fear and alarm as he bowed towards Little Meaty. "Humph! Don't worry, a little thing like you isn't even enough to fill the gaps between my teeth. You're also stained with bad luck, so I'm too lazy to open my mouth." She lifted a hand and pointed at the tablet. "But this thing you're living in isn't bad at all. I want to take it and use it." The little person nearly cried. It fell to its knees and kowtowed again and again. Little Meaty's eyes were ice cold. "You don't want to." The little person froze. He was on edge and could only nod in agreement. "Then come out." The little person didn't want to. This tablet was the foundation of his life. If it was taken away by others, his only fate would be to fade away. But as he looked at the impatient Little Meaty in front of him, he didn't dare to delay at all. Otherwise, he feared he really would be smashed to pieces. Did he really think she was poking around just for fun? No, that was a naked threat. The fog violently tumbled. The little person that had just emerged was pinched between two fingers and pulled out. Before she could scream out loud, her vision darkened and she fell unconscious. Little Meaty licked her lips. She thought that this little thing was far too stupid. Don't be fooled by how she said she didn't care before. But the truth was that she was a bit greedy. Eating her could also be considered a small tonic. But at this time, Little Meaty suddenly frowned. A trace of dissatisfaction appeared in her eyes. She looked at the unconscious little person in her hands and then put it away somewhere. She lifted a hand and pointed between her eyebrows. "Don't forget what you said today. Otherwise, I will definitely be angry." She turned and glanced at Qin Yu. Then she stepped forwards and her body instantly faded away, fusing into the lingering fog of the tablet. Chapter 1602. Nank was illusory, while golden millet was intangible. Even though it was right in front of him, it was still difficult to see with the naked eye and impossible to lock onto with his divine sense. This was a gift from heaven and earth, a natural magical power after the two treasures tied the knot. Li Mu obtained them by chance. It was not an exaggeration to say that he had walked on a heaven-defying path of luck. Of course, he himself was the luckiest person in the world. It was very likely that no one else could compare to him. He could pick up a treasure just by tripping while walking, and he could have an epiphany and break through to the next realm just by turning over in his sleep. In any case, if one really wanted to compare them, then one would have to live up to the old saying, comparisons are odious, odious to death, because it was really hard to believe that there could be such a lucky person in this world. The key was, why was it so? We were all living people, and Li Mu did not give us an extra head or arm. Along the way, there were many people envious and jealous of him, so many that Li Mu had already learned not to care about it, because almost everything he encountered, as long as it was in front of him, could be included in his scope. Above the devil's sect, under the sun, there was no cover. There was only a large stone floating in the air. Its surface was gray and covered with tiny cracks. It looked inconspicuous at first glance. Now, above the stone, there was a big tree with lush branches and lush leaves. Wisps of smoke rose from the bottom of the tree and were sucked up by the greedy branches and green leaves without any leakage. Sitting on the protruding stone, Li Mu controlled the fire with one hand and held the fish stick in the other. His eyes were serious as he roasted the fish carefully. At this moment, with a light pop, a spark sprang out and exploded. Li Mu raised his eyebrows and looked a little surprised. But when he closed his eyes to sense, he found nothing. This made him feel a little uneasy, so he looked a little embarrassed, raising his head to look at Li Ruhua, who was meditating with her eyes closed on the other side of the fire. He coughed lightly and said, "Ru Hua, although I have always trusted your judgment, this time seems to be a little different. Are you hiding something from me?" Li Ruhua opened her eyes and nodded calmly. "Pa!" Li Mu raised his hand to cover his face. The corners of his mouth twitched, and he said with a wry smile, "Why can't you just say it? If you do this, someone might die." Li Ruhua's mouth curled up, showing a little smile. "Did he go in?" Li Mu nodded, and the wry smile on his face deepened. Li Ruhua stood up and clapped her hands. "Don't worry. I'm very confident in your luck. Even if everyone dies, you'll still be alive and kicking." She walked to the side of the tree and patted the trunk. "Let's start working. Let me in." Li Mu raised his eyebrows. "Is it fast?" Li Ruhua sighed softly. "Li Ji's death has something to do with him. It's good enough that I didn't kill him. Should I really give him an opportunity?" Li Ruhua of Li Li sect. Li Mu snapped his fingers. Li Ruhua sat cross-legged. Before her consciousness fell into darkness, Li Mu's voice rang in her ears. "I've told you before, don't talk nonsense. What if it comes true? Let's see what you can do. Go and come back quickly. Maybe you can catch the fish." Li Ruhua's mouth curved into a cold smile. "Comes true? I'm afraid I won't have that chance." Her vision darkened. When it lit up again, she had already appeared beside a cheerful stream. Above their heads, a great sun hung high in the sky. White clouds floated in the sky, moving slowly in the breeze. She took a few steps forward, looked down at the river, and looked at her current appearance. Li Ruhua's face darkened. Damn Li Mu, he actually let her show her true appearance here. Although it was only 70 to 80% similar, it still revealed the secret of heaven. She clenched her teeth. But now that she was in Yellow Millet country, she could only endure. Once she got out, she would deal with Li Mu. There was the sound of falling into the water, followed by a cry of surprise. Li Ruhua helplessly turned around. Sure enough, in the stream, she saw a young boy who was drinking with a cow. He was struggling to get up. When she glanced at him, his face immediately flushed red. With a humph, Li Ruhua turned around and walked away. But after taking 2 steps, she stopped and turned to look at the boy in the river. "Hey, where is this?" The young boy was stunned. He couldn't believe that there was such a beautiful voice in this world. But when he saw the face in front of him, he felt that it was only natural. He stammered, This is Nank country." "Li Mu." Li Ruhua, who looked to be 11 or 12 years old, was extremely beautiful, like a little fairy. She couldn't help but grit her teeth and scream. He did it on purpose. This bastard. He must have done it on purpose. The young boy was dripping wet. Looking at the scene in front of him, he suddenly realized that when a woman was angry, she wasn't as scary as his mother. She was like a man-eating tiger, but she could still be so cute. After Li Ruhua screamed, she lowered her head and thought for a moment. Then she crooked her finger and said, "Boy, this cow of yours is pretty good. Can you give it to me?" Cow. The young boy's eyes widened. He stammered, "It is my mother said it's the betrothal gift for my wife." Li Ruhua smiled. "Okay, give it to me. When I grow up, I will be your wife." Soon, the little girl riding the cow found it difficult to travel along the stream. She wanted to walk and walk. She wanted to cross the border of Nank country and go to Yellow Millet country to find that person. This was a very long journey. As for becoming a wife when I grow up, I'm really sorry. I won't stay here for too long. I'll leave after I kill someone. So, betrothal gift or not, it doesn't matter at all. Suddenly, the sound of running footsteps came from behind. Li Ruhua frowned her beautiful eyebrows and turned around. "What are you doing? The cow is already mine. You promised it yourself. Are you a man going to go back on your word?" She was a bit annoyed. If it weren't for the fact that she was in this world and the price she had to pay for maintaining a clear mind was that she couldn't casually attack, then this boy would have already been sent flying with a single slap. The young boy's face flushed red. He gasped for breath and shook his head. No, no. I just came to tell you that my family lives in Ox Village. The first one on the west side of the village is there. If you can't find it, just tell them you need to go to the one that sells medicine. My father is a village doctor, and he is very famous in this area. Li Ruhua had an impatient expression. I know. Stop being so long-winded. Hurry up and go back. The young boy waved his hand from behind and loudly said, There's one last thing. From today onwards, you are my wife. You must adhere to your womanly ways and don't mess around outside. Otherwise, if I find out, I will definitely chase after you and demand an explanation from you. Li Ruhua's face darkened. She forcefully patted the large yellow cow that was shaking its head. She thought to herself that she would never come back to this broken place again. And Limu, hurry up and close your eyes. If you dare to say a single word about what happened here, I will definitely make you suffer. In reality, Limu really wasn't paying attention to what was happening within the borders of the Nank country. This was because just as Li Ruhua entered, on top of the large stone that hung high in the sky and no one had discovered, a small memorial tablet inexplicably appeared. However, Limu felt that it was very, very large. It was large enough to cover the entire sky. The corner of his mouth twitched, and he secretly cursed Li Ruhua for setting him up. He saluted respectfully with one hand, while the other hand was still stubbornly grasping the fish that was about to be roasted. Vaguely, Limu felt the gaze on the roasted fish. He subconsciously tightened his grip, licked the corner of his mouth, and coughed softly. May I ask who you are, Your Excellency? The mist on the surface of the memorial tablet moved slightly, and a chuckle came from it. But the following words were very rude. Your ancestor. Limu's face was bitter. Although my ancestor is indeed a memorial tablet now, you can't joke like this. After all, the Li family of the Central Desolate still cares about face. The mist on the surface of the memorial tablet continued to billow. If you don't accept it, then hit me. Limu seriously thought for a moment and then shook his head. I think it's better not to court death. Don't you think so? The memorial tablet swayed as if it were nodding. Since you don't want to die, then open a path. I will go in and take a look. Limu gripped the wooden stick with the roasted fish and tightened his grip. The surface of his palm was slightly pale, but his expression was still calm. He only revealed a bit of distress. With your cultivation level, even if the world is vast, what kind of scenery have you not seen? Why go inside? Why don't I treat you to some fish and let's just forget about it? A sneer came from the memorial tablet. I think you really want to die. After a slight pause, he continued, Limu, you are indeed very lucky. It can even be said that you are the luckiest creature I have ever seen. But have you ever heard that a person who has always been very lucky may lose his life one day because of a small problem? For example, you don't open a path for me. This threat was really on the surface. There was no doubt about it. There was no intention of hiding it at all. Limu raised his hand to wipe the cold sweat on his forehead. He was not pretending, but he was really sweating, because his intuition told him that today he might really die. This was the first time that he had felt this way. He was very curious and wanted to have a try. After all, his life was really boring. It was not easy for him to have a real challenge. But when Limu raised his head and saw the memorial tablet opposite him, he immediately gave up the idea. He was eager to make trouble in front of a memorial tablet. It was too unlucky to make trouble in front of a memorial tablet. If he was not careful, he might really die. Wouldn't that be extremely tragic? Ahem, that's right. I was pretending to be tough just now, but there is no rule in this world that forbids people from pretending to be tough, right? Can you guarantee that you won't hurt Li Ruhua's life? A faint voice came from the memorial tablet. I promise. So fast? Isn't it a little insincere? Limu secretly thought, but when he looked at the impatient smoke on the memorial tablet, He decisively snapped his fingers. Swish! A cloud of smoke directly separated from the memorial tablet and disappeared in an instant. Li Mu's eyes widened in astonishment. A sneer came from the memorial tablet. Are you stupid? I didn't say that I would go in with my whole body. You think too much. Chapter 1603. When the little fairy maiden rode the cow south, she would have to pass through the vast Jianghu to reach the Golden Millet Kingdom. The road was long, and it was destined to be filled with dangers, especially now that 70 to 80% of her true appearance had been revealed. The chances of her triggering dangers had increased by more than 100 times. But in the end, the little fairy maiden was still a little fairy maiden. Even if she was restricted and couldn't act as she pleased, she could still crush all the disgusting gazes around her with a single hand. But she still found a way to ensure her own safety. For instance, along the way, she gradually found herself 7 unofficial masters. According to the little fairy maiden, she wanted to walk around and think about it. Only then could she finally decide which master she would take as her master. Before this, they could only hide their tracks and follow by her side. They couldn't jump out and disturb her as she toured the mountains and rivers. Otherwise, they would automatically lose the chance to be chosen as her master. If it was anyone else who dared to make such an unreasonable request, and even find 7 unofficial masters in one go, they would have already been taught a lesson by the Jianghu. But facing the little fairy maiden, the 7 unofficial masters all smiled more kindly than the last, repeatedly nodding their heads to show that there was absolutely no problem. After all, they could see with a single glance the aptitude of an immortal. As long as this little girl riding on the cow stepped onto the road of cultivation, she would definitely ascend to the ascension realm, becoming a celestial being that would ascend to the heavens. Since they had encountered such a disciple, how could they let her go? Even if they died, they wouldn't. Just like that, the little fairy maiden headed south. The 7 unofficial masters were always 7. Those who didn't open their eyes didn't need her to do anything. They were directly cleaned up. Those who opened their eyes widened and their mouths drooled. But before they could even report their sect and roots, they were surrounded by several people who had appeared out of nowhere. They cupped their hands in greeting with solemn expressions. After a brief conversation, most of these people who opened their eyes sighed and beat their chests with their hands, their expressions as if their hearts had died. But there were also some who didn't care at all. As soon as they opened their mouths, they said that they would take one of the 7 unofficial masters, because the little fairy maiden had said that she only wanted 7 masters, not one more or one less. She said that if they included her, they would be awe-inspiring as they roamed the Jianghu. If they weren't convinced, they would fight. The loser wanted to cry, but had no tears. They would vomit blood as they left, miserably. However, the nominal masters who had been usurped were certainly not willing to miss the opportunity to have a disciple with immortal aptitude. They turned around and looked for the elders of their sections. Those who didn't have a sect went to look for their old friends. Those who didn't have anything to do with either side gritted their teeth and sold the news in exchange for a windfall. If I can't get the disciple, don't even think about getting him easily. As a result, the Jianghu of the Nank nation was quickly stirred up. Some of the great figures that had been living in seclusion were alarmed and quietly revealed themselves. They had a great reputation, so they naturally couldn't make a move just for a mere piece of news. Otherwise, it would be too degrading. Then, after they hid themselves and personally took a look, they could no longer suppress the excitement in their hearts. They directly revealed their identities and found the group of people who were hiding beside their little fairy. When some of them saw who it was, they smiled bitterly and left on their own. Some of them were unwilling to let go and were beaten until they vomited a few vats of blood, looking extremely miserable. In short, after a few rounds of elimination, the 7 inne masters were still 7, but they had already been replaced by those legendary names. Only then did the situation gradually stabilize. The shock that swept through the Jianghu of the Nank nation and Liang nation gradually calmed down. But in the Jianghu any expert with a bit of status knew that in the current world, there was a little girl who rode a yellow bull to the south. She was someone they absolutely could not provoke. It was said that within the Nank Nation, the young master of the Haiyan County's county governor had had all 4 of his limbs broken in a moment of rashness. He had been tossed at the entrance of the county governor's mansion. Afterwards, not only had the Haiyan County governor gritted his teeth and admitted his mistake, he had even personally gone to apologize. His attitude was extremely humble, but in the end, he didn't even get to see the young master. When he returned to his mansion, his face was deathly pale. He dragged out the young master who was moaning on the sickbed and gave him another violent beating. After this matter, the Junghu was in a state of panic. Countless sects recalled their disciples or warned them not to provoke the young master. Otherwise, they would be killed on the spot. Even if they died, they would have died in vain. The sects definitely wouldn't stand up for this matter. Perhaps they would even be purged and their fates would be miserable. This was the case for both the righteous and demonic paths, but there were no exceptions. Little fairy Li Ruhua, who was riding on the yellow ox, was very clear about all of this. The reason why she was hiding in the dark and was still willing to keep her original promise to the 7 incredible masters who were following by her side was because she would occasionally sweep her gaze over them. Her gaze was bright and penetrating, as if she knew everything like the back of her hand. This caused the 7 peak powerhouses of Nank and Huangliang countries to sigh inwardly. No matter what thoughts they had in their hearts, they hesitated again and again. But in the end, they didn't dare to break the rules. They chose to silently wait for an opportunity. As they headed south, the little stream that had once flowed past them couldn't even drown them. But now, that little boy's head had become a roaring river. Li Ruhua furrowed her eyebrows in annoyance. Why did she suddenly think of that cow-herding boy? Could it be that she was truly angered? She looked up into the distance. Mist rose up and turned into clouds, obscuring her vision. But Li Ruhua knew that she was already very close. This caused her mood to improve a little. Although she hadn't suffered the slightest grievance along the way, it was still far too boring. Find him, kill him, and quickly leave this place. For cultivators, especially tyrannical and powerful great cultivators, to be restricted from using their cultivation was an extremely depressing feeling. In any case, she couldn't continue to endure it. On the bank of the river was a newly built official road of Huangliang country. It was said to make it convenient for nearby officials and rich families to come to the riverside to enjoy the scenery. So along the way, there were many carriages coming and going. Most of them wore luxurious clothes and had an extraordinary bearing. As they saw the calm and composed little fairy maiden riding on the back of the yellow bull, they were dazzled for a brief moment. Then, their hearts were filled with excitement, but they also couldn't suppress their nervousness. Those noble young masters who were riding on tall horses and dressed in all kinds of robes subconsciously straightened their backs and showed their most elegant and elegant side. Their hopes weren't high, but what if the little fairy maiden riding the yellow bull took a fancy to them? At that time, it would be a heaven-shattering fortune and lucky chance. If it weren't for this, even though the scenery of the rushing river here wasn't bad, it wouldn't be so densely packed with tourists. It was as if all the handsome young masters of the right age within 1,000 miles had gathered here. Li Ruhua knew all of this like the back of her hand. She didn't need to think to figure out the hidden story. She didn't care, nor was she annoyed. After all, the 2 of them weren't people from the same world. If they wanted to see, then so be it. In any case, after she left, the memories of these people would become blurred. In the end, they would only remember that they had seen a very beautiful girl when they were young. But no matter how they thought about it, they simply couldn't remember what she looked like. Suddenly, the little fairy maiden riding on the back of the yellow bull reached out and patted the yellow bull. It immediately obediently stopped. "Excuse me, what is that place in front of us surrounded by fog?" The one being questioned was a 14 or 15-year-old youth. He had sword-like eyebrows and starry eyes, and was incomparably handsome. His entire body exuded an air of nobility. Obviously, his background wasn't ordinary. At this moment, as he looked at the little fairy maiden in front of him, he blushed but didn't lose his composure. He took a deep breath and cupped his hands in salute. "Miss, that place is called Cloud Mist Valley. It's the place where a local immortal master lives in seclusion. Ordinary people can't casually approach it." He was about to vaguely reveal his identity and say that he could lead the way to the valley, but before he could open his mouth, he was interrupted. "Cloud Mist Valley? The name isn't bad, and the scenery isn't bad either. I hope I didn't come to the wrong place." Li Ruhua smiled and nodded, leaving behind a disappointed and frustrated young master. His lips moved, but he didn't know what to say. She patted the yellow bull and walked into the depths of the fog. This little fellow was about the same age as him, but his demeanor were more than 100 times worse. I didn't even spare a glance at the noble young master who came to me on his own initiative, but this little toad actually wanted to take me as his wife. How audacious of him! The corners of Li Ruhua's mouth curled up. She didn't know why she thought of this at this moment, and why she felt indescribably proud. It was probably because, after running around, the time had finally come for the mystery to be revealed. Was he really the barbarian sovereign? On Nank Rock, under the yellow millet tree, no one could hide their spirituality. If she hadn't cheated, of course, she wouldn't have been able to see it. But since she had cheated, she naturally only needed a glance to see through his roots. In Yellow Millet Country's Cloud Mist Valley, Taoist Cloud Mist, who was concentrating on building a hut and cultivating a Taoist law, looked at the little girl passing through the fog and arriving on the yellow bull. His eyes subconsciously widened, then suddenly brightened, revealing an irrepressible and endless fervor. It was as if two suns had suddenly appeared from behind the clouds, enough to cause the air to burn. With a light cough, Taoist Cloud Mist took a deep breath and tried his best to display the demeanor of an expert. He rode the wind and arrived as elegant as an immortal. "Little girl, this poor Taoist is fated to meet you. I have been waiting here for many days. Are you willing to become my disciple and cultivate a supreme Taoist law so that you can live forever?" Li Ruhua blinked her eyes. She looked at Taoist Cloud Mist, who was forcing himself to stay calm and whose heart was beating like thunder. She smiled and softly said, "Disciple greets master." Taoist Cloud Mist was startled, and an ecstasy gushed out from the bottom of his heart. He raised his head and laughed wildly. But just as this laughter began, it froze. He was like a toad covered in ice. Although he maintained his laughing expression, his eyes revealed endless fear. In short, his appearance was extremely strange. Li Ruhua furrowed her eyebrows. She turned her head and looked somewhere behind her. The completely still cloud mist began to surge once more. "Hoochie! Hoochie!" Taoist Cloud Mist gasped for breath. He looked up at the little fairy maiden in front of him and couldn't help but reveal a look of fear and unease. You are," Li Ruhua smiled. "Master, how come your memory is so bad? I am the little disciple you just received. Do you not want to recognize me?" Her smile became increasingly sweet, as if all the beauty and light in the world were gathered around her. But at this moment, Taoist Cloud Mist felt as if he had been locked onto by some terrifying being hidden in the shadows. If he wasn't careful, he would lose his life. He wanted to cry, but no tears came out. He wanted to ask, did he take the wrong script? Shouldn't the old immortal have stumbled upon a fine jade and cultivated her with all his strength, finally leaving his name in the annals of history? How come in the blink of an eye it had turned into a horrifying scene? It was as if he had fallen into a swamp and could be swallowed up at any moment. His thoughts raced. Taoist Cloud Mist clenched his teeth. "It's my memory that's bad. What is your name?" "Li Ruhua, as beautiful as a flower." "Master, please lead the way. I want to see the two senior apprentice brothers in front of me." Taoist Cloud Mist's vision darkened, and he nearly fainted. "Today was the first time we met. So how did you know that I had two disciples?" This was proof. There must be some hidden scheme behind this. My Cloud Mist Valley is in danger. His heart wailed in anguish. He was in unbearable pain, and he was even more terrified. However, when he saw Li Ruhua smiling like a flower in front of him, Taoist Cloudy Mist couldn't utter a single word. He also didn't have the courage to sacrifice himself and shed all pretense of cordiality with her on the spot. One old and one young, they turned and walked into Cloud Mist Valley. The old Taoist bowed his head, but the little girl was bouncing up and down. It was clear she was in a good mood. Chapter 1604. Taoist Cloudy Mist was a cultivator in the lower middle reaches of the yellow millet country. He was only somewhat famous in this area. In his early years, he was mediocre and ambitious. Later, he was taught a lesson by the Jianghu. Disheartened, he came to the Cloud Mist Valley and built a hut. He also accepted 2 disciples. The eldest disciple was named Ning Chongqing. He was a young master of a noble family in the capital of the yellow millet country. Although his family was not very prominent, it was still a prosperous family. Every year, he would send a large amount of wealth to the Cloud Mist Valley on time. It was the key to Taoist cloudy mists cultivation and not pay attention to the outside world. The second disciple was named Shirko. It was the right name given by his parents. He was a man of few words, as if he had a mouth made of stone. He was born in a poor family. His parents had long died, leaving him alone. If it weren't for his good cultivation aptitude, Taoist Cloudy Mist would have long driven him out. What was the use of keeping a bastard who didn't even call him master? But unexpectedly, the relationship between these 2 disciples was very good. They always ate and lived together and supervised each other in cultivation. This was the only thing that made Taoist Cloudy Mist feel a little gratified. It was also because of this that he accepted a new disciple today. When the 2 of them came to meet him, the 2 arrived together. As the senior brother, he saw Li Ruhua standing next to Taoist Cloudy Mist at first glance. His eyes suddenly lit up. Shirko followed behind. His slightly dark face blushed. Fortunately, it was not obvious. He cautiously bowed and stood aside in silence. Ahem. Her name is Li Ruhua. From today on, she will be your junior sister. I hope the 3 of you can support each other and cultivate together. After saying that, Taoist Cloudy Mist found an excuse and directly left. He said that he wanted to let his fellow brothers and sisters get to know each other. Li Ruhua glanced at Taoist Cloudy Mist's back and stepped forward with a smile. She bowed and said, "Greetings, senior brothers." She blinked her eyes and looked left and right. Her smile remained unchanged, but deep down she couldn't help but sigh softly. This time he did not hesitate to call Li Mu over and went through a lot of trouble to open the golden millet realm of Nank, but in the end he returned disappointed. She found the mark that Li Mu had made in advance, but the handsome Ning Chongqing didn't have the slightest aura of the barbarians. Of course, he couldn't be the barbarian emperor. In the end, she had misjudged this game of chess and wasted a favor for nothing. Li Mu was very shrewd. It would be difficult to make him owe a favor in the future. As for Shirko at the side, she only glanced at him before giving up. However, she didn't make it too obvious on the surface. After chatting for a while, Shirko looked at his junior sister, who was clearly closer to his first senior brother. He pursed his lips, cupped his hands, and left. He had always been a stiff and cold person. Since his junior sister was unwilling to get close to him, he would take the initiative to distance himself from her. According to the agreement between Li Ruhua and the Western Wilderness Great Emperor, after confirming Marquis Zhongwu's background and confirming that he had nothing to do with the new barbarian emperor, this golden millet realm of Nank could only be considered as compensation to avoid Marquis Zhongwu resenting him in the future. But in fact, after entering this realm, there was only one thought in Li Ruhua's mind. Marquis Zhongwu Ningqin must die. Tearing up the cooperation with the great emperor of Western Wilderness was indeed a big trouble. But in the territory of Nank Golden Millet, accidents could also happen. as long as he got himself clean and didn't leave behind any evidence. What could the great emperor of Western Wilderness do? This was not the imperial capital, and Li Mu was here. He couldn't just watch her die under the thunderous rage of the Western Wilderness great emperor. As for the reason for forcing Marquis Zhongwu to kill Ningqin, it was simple. It was because ever since she saw Marquis Zhongwu from afar in the imperial capital, she always had a feeling of dread in her heart. It was as if there was a fishbone stuck in her throat. Even if he wasn't the barbarian emperor, Li Ruhua still wanted him dead. This was the first time she had such a feeling in her life. But Li Ruhua didn't hesitate at all. Even when she reached the agreement with the Western Wilderness great emperor, she already had this idea. His Majesty probably didn't expect that there was someone in the Western Wilderness who dared to play this game with him. Of course, as she said just now, the best result was that she could get out of this matter unscathed and get rid of all the troubles. And for this, she had already made preparations in advance and found a chess piece to take action. Therefore, on the night when Taoist Cloudy Mist was dragged away for a heart-to-heart talk, he returned with a pale face. Although he clearly sensed Li Ruhua's movement, he just turned over and blocked his perception, not paying attention to what was going on outside the window. With a disaster looming, he didn't have the energy and time to care about the life and death of his two disciples. It was already good enough that he could survive. Li Ruhua knocked on the door. It was Ning Chongqing who opened the door. Seeing little junior sister outside, his face lit up with joy. But before he could speak, Li Ruhua smiled and said, "Eldest senior brother, I'm looking for second senior brother. Please tell him." Ning Chongqing was stunned for a moment before he regained his composure. He turned around and shouted, "Shirko, little junior sister is looking for you." He smiled without losing his elegance and turned back. Shirko came to the door, still silent and cautious. He paused for a moment and said dryly, "What's the matter?" Li Ruhua smiled. "It's not convenient to say. I don't know if second senior brother is willing to accompany me for a walk in the valley." With his back facing the two, Ning Chongqing, who was holding the bamboo slip, slightly stiffened. Under the light of the lamp, his eyes revealed a trace of darkness. Shirko was silent for a moment and nodded. He first turned around to tell eldest senior brother, took a coat to avoid the cold, and then left with Li Ruhua. In the room, Ning Chongqing put down the bamboo slip in his hand. His handsome face showed a trace of confusion and grievance. It seemed that he didn't expect this, but in his heart there weren't too many other thoughts. It was just that his mood inevitably dropped and he became listless. After leaving their residence, Shirko and Li Ruhua were silent. No one spoke until the girl beside them stopped. Shirko looked up at her and said, "I know that you don't actually care about me. So, little junior sister, if you want to say something, then just get straight to the point." Li Ruhua smiled and nodded. "I came here to fulfill a promise. I want to tell you something. For example, just who you are." Shirko had a vigilant expression. "Little junior sister, what do you mean by this?" Li Ruhua lifted a hand. "Don't move." Then, Shirko discovered that he really couldn't move at all. A soft and cool fingertip gently tapped between his eyebrows. He felt as if a long sword had ruthlessly pierced through the space between his eyebrows. Under the stirring of pain, his head nearly split open from the middle. He opened his mouth, but before he could cry out, he was pressed down by Li Ruhua's hand. She smiled and winked at him. "You can only wake up after suffering. I know it is hard to bear, but believe me, after you wake up, you will most likely thank me for this." An hour later, he was in so much pain that he was hovering between life and death. His robes were soaked through, and he looked like a stone that had been fished out of the water. He lay on his back on the ground, gasping for breath. However, the look in his eyes had changed. Two states of confusion and sobriety constantly flashed by. Li Ruhua took 2 steps back. She said in a soft voice, "To be forcefully woken up from your dreams must be uncomfortable. Go back and sleep. When you open your eyes tomorrow, Everything will be fine. Shirko stood up and staggered away. The next day, he was woken up by eldest senior brother Ning Chonging. His face was deathly pale, as if he had been gravely ill. Junior apprentice brother, what happened to you? Don't scare me. Shirko narrowed his eyes, as if he had been in the dark for too long and could not see the light. He subconsciously raised his hand to cover his face. After several breaths, he shook his head. Senior apprentice brother, I am fine. Ning Chonging let out a long breath. You scared me. You were not right when you came back last night. Junior apprentice sister asked you to go out. Are you all right? Shirko frowned, a pained expression on his face, but he quickly shook his head. I am fine. I just did not sleep well. Senior apprentice brother, please help me ask for a leave from teacher. I am not feeling well today, so I will stay in my room to rest. Ning Chonging nodded. Okay, you rest. I will ask for a leave for you. Seeing Shirko close his eyes and fall into a deep sleep, Ning Chonging hesitated. He felt that something was wrong with his junior apprentice brother today, but he could not find anything after thinking about it. He could only say that he was thinking too much. As he left his residence, he was surprised to find that his master had left him a note. He said that he was bringing the new junior apprentice sister to obtain a lucky chance. He also told him to stay in the valley and cultivate. He could not slack off just because there was no one to supervise him. Patting the bamboo slip in his hand, Ning Chonging raised his hand and scratched his head. Although the young man could clearly see that it was indeed the master's handwriting, his tone was the same as his junior brother's today, revealing a trace of strangeness. Moreover, his junior apprentice sister had just arrived yesterday, and today she was taken away by his master. He felt that this matter was a bit rushed. Thinking about it, Ning Chonging could not find anything. He could only patiently cultivate by himself. His talent was good, and he had always cultivated diligently. He was the kind of person that did not need the supervision of teachers. Because of this, he felt that his master's tone was a bit strange. Taoist Cloudy Mist's face paled and his legs trembled. He felt as if he would faint at any moment. This was because he was frightened. If it was anyone else who was stared at by the 7 expressionless people in front of him, they would also be like this. They would not be any better than him. Of these 7 people, he only knew one. It was because of a lucky chance in his early years. More accurately, he had thickened his skin and went to a banquet. He had seen this person from a distance, in a corner of the banquet. This was the peak great cultivator of golden millet country. And that was already enough. Since the other 6 could sit on the same level as this person in front of him, there were naturally existences on the same level. Taoist Cloudy Mist wanted to cry, but no tears came out. He really did not know what sin he had committed to actually suffer such a great calamity. Right now, there was only one thought in the depths of his heart. I'm dead, I'm dead. I'm really dead this time. Let alone these people moving a finger. If they continued to look at me, I'm afraid I would be scared to death. His face paled again and again. Not a single trace of blood could be seen. All right, unofficial masters, the one in front of you is my true master. Although it's only for a day, as the saying goes, a master for a day must be treated seriously. Therefore, no one can die. Li Ruhua said with a smile. She glanced at Taoist Cloudy Mist, who was letting out a long breath of relief and a look of gratitude on his face. Her next words almost scared him to the point of pissing his pants. Then I'll ask several registered masters to extract his soul and refine it into a puppet that won't talk too much. It shouldn't be difficult to cut off the karmic ties between us, right? An old woman with a gloomy face who didn't speak or smile let out 2 sharp laughs. This matter, of course, is not difficult. In terms of refining people's souls, if my ghost god Valley admits that we are second, none of you here would have the face to admit that you are first. But little girl, if I help you do this, can you agree to come with me to the ghost god Valley to cultivate? Humph. Old ghost woman, don't go too far. Although your ghost god Valley is indeed powerful in refining people's souls, If you want to take away my beloved disciple for such a small matter, you must be dreaming. Little girl, as long as you acknowledge me as your master, I can help you with this. I can even use a treasure to help you completely erase your aura so that no one will be able to detect it. The other 5 people all sneered. Their general meaning was the same. No one was willing to give up on this disciple in front of them. After all, she had the talent to become an immortal. Training her well was one thing, but it might also be a lucky chance for them. Li Ruhua didn't stop them from quarreling. She just smiled and looked at them. When they quieted down a little, she raised her hand and pointed. "Ghost Granny, I'll choose you." After saying that, she stuck out her tongue at them. "I'm sorry, but I have to guarantee that no one will know what I'm doing, so I can only choose the best one. You all have admitted this yourself. Also, I need to ask seniors to help me keep this a secret. Don't tell anyone about what happened in the Cloud Mist Valley." Ghost Granny laughed. Her wrinkled face was like a flower. "Little girl, you really have good eyes. Then, from now on, you are the direct disciple of our Ghost God Valley's ancestral Master Hull. This old woman is waiting for my master to accept her as his disciple. In the future, you can just call me Senior Sister." After saying that, her dark eyes swept over the people around her. "Everyone, you all heard it. This is the little girl's own choice. I believe you all won't break your promise, right? Otherwise, our Ghost God Valley hasn't opened our doors for many years." The expressions of the people around her changed. Obviously, they were afraid, but they couldn't bear to abandon this disciple with the talent to become an immortal. Just as they were hesitating, Li Ruhua laughed and said, "You all heard my senior sister's words. Why aren't you leaving? Otherwise, don't blame me for not acknowledging the rather harmonious master-disciple relationship between us." They didn't know why, but after hearing these words, several of the powerful old monsters felt their hearts palpitate. Looking at each other, they took a deep breath. Without saying a word, they turned around and left. In the blink of an eye, they disappeared without a trace. As for whether they really left or hid in the dark, no one knew. But to Li Ruhua, this wasn't important, because these people would soon forget about her. After thinking about it and making sure she didn't make any mistakes, she looked up and said with a smile, "Senior Sister, then I'll have to trouble you." Ghost Granny's face was full of smiles. She nodded and grabbed Taoist Cloudy Mist's head. He screamed and blood flowed out of his 7 orifices. His eyes were wide open, revealing endless pain. A moment later, a black fog soared into the sky. Ghost Granny's smile was horrifying. "Little Junior Sister, let's go back to the Ghost God Valley." Li Ruhua nodded and said, "Okay." Chapter 1605. 2 months later, in the secluded Ghost God Valley, a little fairy girl walked out. She wrinkled her nose and looked back, only to see flames soaring into the sky. Many figures were struggling inside, but soon lost their strength and fell to the ground, turning into ashes. Don't blame me. You asked for it. So, the saying, "the evils you bring upon yourself are the hardest to bear." It makes sense. Li Ruhua said with a smile, looking extremely calm. Although she couldn't take the initiative to attack before entering this realm, Li Mu gave her some authority to use it within a certain range. She was the rule. Since the people of the Ghost God Valley wanted to break the rules, they were naturally attacked by the rules and ended up like this. The heavenly fire descended and burned everything. Of course, these people of the Ghost God Valley wouldn't die in vain. They would be sacrificed by Li Ruhua to make a deal with the bigger rules of this world. For example, completely erasing the traces she left in this world. Of course, this process would be carried out bit by bit in the next 10 years, or even decades. It would be enough for the creatures in this world to not notice it. Even for some extremely powerful existences, this was the limitation of different dimensions and horizons. Even though everything in the Nang country and Huangliang country had reached the Tao integration stage and could be regarded as part of the world, they were still different. Li Ruhua withdrew her gaze and continued to walk out. As she walked, she thought, so much time has passed. It should be about time, right? What she needed to do now was to wait patiently for the detection to arrive. After confirming that Marquis Zhongwu Ningqin had been killed, she would leave directly. Cloud and Mist Valley. 2 months had passed, but there was still no news from his master and junior sister, which made Ning Chongqing a little worried. But compared to that, what worried the eldest senior brother in the valley even more was that his junior brother seemed to have changed into a different person during this period of time. Although he was still silent, sometimes his junior brother looked at him from behind, which made him feel a chill down his spine. He always felt that there were many things hidden in his junior brother's eyes. Ning Chongqing tried to ask, but his junior brother always shook his head and refused to answer. Later, Ning Chongqing found that his junior brother was carving bamboo slips in private and writing a lot of things on them. He didn't intend to peek at them. After all, they belonged to his junior brother. However, the bamboo slips were placed randomly and sometimes fell on his table. Occasionally glancing at it, Ning Chongqing found that what his junior brother had carved on the bamboo slips was actually a person's life. It was a story similar to a biography. After reading a few paragraphs, he found it interesting and took the initiative to mention it to his junior brother. If senior Marshall brother wants to read it, feel free to flip through it. Sure Ko's tone was calm, his eyes deep. Ning Chongqing felt that something was wrong, but for some reason, the stories engraved on the bamboo slips had a strong attraction to him. After hesitating for a while, he nodded and said, "Then I'll take a look. I'll just check it out for my junior brother." The story was very long. It was about a foreign country called the Western Wilderness. One day, a man named Ning Qin came to the country. Ning Chongqing was engrossed in the story. Sometimes, when he looked up after a long time, his eyes would subconsciously reveal a sense of confusion. And every time this happened, Shirko would quietly look at Ning Chongqing. Under the tree, outside the window, by the stream, in the fog, his shadow could be seen everywhere. More and more bamboo slips appeared. Ning Chongqing was completely engrossed, until one night, when the skies above his head were particularly dark and not a single star appeared. He put down the last bamboo slip. It was about Marquis Loyal Marshal Ningqin. When he led his army back to the border, he encountered a lucky chance along the way. His soul entered a mystic realm and his life began anew. "Senior apprentice brother, have you finished reading?" Shirko calmly said. Across from him, Ning Chongqing was in a trance. After several breaths of time, he nodded. His eyes were sometimes clear and sometimes confused. "Junior apprentice brother, I always feel that the person in your story is very familiar with me. There is even a feeling that I am him and he is me." Shirko was silent for a moment. He slowly said, "Senior apprentice brother's feeling is correct. You are indeed Marquis Loyal Marshal, the Ningqin in the story. This is because when he led his army back to the border army camp, the lucky chance he encountered was the descent of Nank, the dream of golden millet. That's right, it is the Nank Nation. The golden millet nation is where you and I are now." Ning Chongqing's eyes widened. He was shocked and in disbelief. But soon, a pained expression appeared on his face. He couldn't help but hold his head in his hands, mumbling to himself, "I am Ning Qin. I am Marquis Loyal Marshal. No, my name is Ning Chongqing. I am a descendant of the Ning family of the Golden Millet Nation. But who is Ning Qin? Why do I feel so familiar? Who am I? Who am I?" Ning Chongqing's pain increased. He gasped for breath in great gulps. Shirko suddenly said, "Senior apprentice brother, to be woken up from a dream by someone is indeed a very uncomfortable matter. But please believe me, your current experience is already very good. At the very least, it is much better than what I experienced in the past." He reached out and patted Ning Chongqing's shoulder. "Sleep, sleep, and everything will be over." Ning Chongqing struggled to open his eyes. There was some anxiety and fear in them, but he couldn't control his body. He nodded at Shirko and quickly fell asleep. His eyebrows were still tightly furrowed and his body was constantly tense and relaxed. It was clear that even in his dream, it wasn't easy. After waiting for a moment, Shirko took out a saber from his chest. He looked at the sleeping Ning Changing and unsheathed the saber and placed it on his neck. "Senior apprentice brother, please go on your way." With a ruthless swipe, blood gushed out. He had used so much strength, and with the sharpness of the saber, Ning Changing's head was instantly severed from his body. Looking at the decapitated corpse in front of him, Shirko frowned. He didn't think that this matter would be so easily accomplished. After checking and confirming that Ning Changing was dead, Shirko flipped his hand and stabbed the saber into his own chest. His face suddenly paled, but there was a look of relief on his face. With a plop, he breathed his last. Shirko also had 10 mouths. When put together, they formed the character. His name was Yi Gui. He was a wandering ghost of the Yi family that had long been removed from the family. It could even be said that many years ago, when he discovered that he was a barbarian, Yi Gui had already died. What lived to this day was only an empty shell. Within the Golden Millet Kingdom, within Nank Mountain, there was a saying that touched upon the foundation of the great Tao. It was true and false and true. This world seemed no different from the outside world, but it was still an illusory world formed by 2 treasures. In this illusory world, if one was killed after they were awake, then they would truly die. This was the meaning of the words false and true. So, when Yi Gui committed suicide, he had truly killed himself. The body he left in the outside world had already lost all signs of life. Then the Marquis Zhongwu, who was in a semi-conscious state but had actually woken up after being killed by him, naturally also died. 100 miles away from the Valley of Ghosts and Gods, in a deep forest, Li Ruhua was sitting on a slender branch, her body as light as a feather as if she were weightless. Suddenly, her eyes brightened and she revealed a bright and brilliant smile. This scene was like flowers blooming in the warmth of spring. It made one feel as if the entire world had suddenly become bright and beautiful. He's dead, just like this." She closed her eyes and carefully sensed her surroundings. After confirming that the aura belonging to Marquis Zhongwu had completely disappeared, she opened her eyes and waved her fist. She laughed. "Good, very good, this is simply too good." She stood up and stepped on a branch. A gust of wind blew past, causing her to rise and fall. Li Ruhua walked back and forth several times. Then she suddenly jumped up and spread her arms like a fairy. Then, in the next moment, with a loud bang, she fell to the ground. She wouldn't fall. Even if she couldn't use her cultivation, her foundation was still there. Li Ruhua opened her eyes and looked around. Then she looked down at her feet. She frowned and impatiently said, "Li Mu, stop playing around. Let me out immediately." There was no response. Li Ruhua's frown deepened. She coldly sneered, "I'm warning you, don't go too far, otherwise I will really be angry." As soon as she finished speaking, she flipped her hand, took out an object, and directly crushed it. With a light crack, the space suddenly distorted. But in the next moment, as if an invisible hand had grabbed the space, it pulled outward, and the distorted space immediately returned to normal. Li Ruhua staggered. This time, she really fell to the ground. She didn't get up. Her eyes were extremely cold as she slowly glanced around. She didn't know what went wrong, but it was obvious that something had really happened. Li Mu had always been a person with a sense of propriety. Even if he was joking, he would not go too far. In other words, all this had nothing to do with Li Mu, but he was the master of the Nank Stone and the yellow millet tree. Except for him, who else could interfere in this world? And where did Li Mu go? "Little girl, you have to keep your promise. You haven't finished your task yet. Of course, you can't leave now." A calm voice came from all directions. When it entered one's ears, one would not be able to tell where the person was. Li Ruhua was expressionless. "You're playing tricks. Are you sure you want to be the enemy of the leaf family of the Central Wilderness? Wow, the leaf family of the Central Wilderness. I'm really scared, but that's all in the future. You should worry about yourself now. After a slight pause, the voice continued. Don't worry, I promised someone that I wouldn't harm your life. I will only let you go after you keep your promise. But don't even think about roasted fish. I'm very hungry. I can't eat you, so I can only use it to satisfy my hunger. Li Ruhua's pupils shrank. Something had happened to Li Mu. She was about to forcefully erupt her cultivation at all costs. But at this moment, a deep tiredness surged over her like a tide, sweeping away all obstacles, not giving her the slightest chance to resist. Her vision darkened, and she fell into a deep sleep. The space twisted slightly. A bamboo slip emerged, floating above Li Ruhua. After a moment of silence, a sneer came out. You've got it easy. As it spoke, the bamboo slip unfolded and expanded. Like a sleeping mat, it wrapped around Li Ruhua and soared into the sky, disappearing without a trace in the blink of an eye. On Nank Rock, beneath the yellow millet tree, Li Mu bitterly smiled, his face pale. If you do this, I will die. The tablet above his head jumped up as if it were slapping him on the head. You can choose whether to be killed by me now, or die later. Li Mu's bitter smile deepened. But he didn't doubt that the person hidden within the tablet was surging with violent killing intent. If he dared to resist or continue to oppose it, he really would die. The other party's mood seemed to worsen by a great deal. Just by sensing it, he felt as if the world was collapsing. But this matter was originally done by you. So why are you so angry because of this? Li Mu couldn't figure it out. Pah! The tablet jumped up again. If you can't figure it out, then don't think about it. I'm really hungry right now. Is the fish ready? If it's not, I will consider eating you. Li Mu sucked in a breath of cold air. He nodded again and again. It'll be ready soon. It'll be ready soon. Although I have a good relationship with you, it was you, Li Ruhua, who tricked me first and caused me to fall into such a situation. So, you brought this trouble upon yourself. So don't blame me for being disloyal. Turning to face the fire, Li Mu concentrated on roasting the fish. He didn't forget to completely retract his perception of Nank and yellow millet tree. Otherwise, if he really saw what happened next, he feared that Li Ruhua would really kill him to silence him. The tablet fell on top of his head. Clouds tumbled on its surface, sometimes fast and sometimes slow, giving off a stifling feeling. You smelly woman, I really want to eat you up. Nank Nation. Upstream of the Blue Waves River, there was an ordinary village beneath a snowy mountain. Because more than half of the villagers had the surname Ox, after several disputes, the name Ox Village came to be. Towards this name, the villagers with different surnames were certainly dissatisfied, but fists were more effective than words. After being hammered several times, they cursed in their hearts, but no one dared to say anything. Simply put, the small families in the village lived a slightly sullen life, but they were not bullied to the point where they couldn't continue living. In the west of Yochi village, the Chin family's male master was a self-taught village doctor. Although he wasn't officially recognized, anyone in the surrounding villages who had a headache or fever could find him to treat them. People ate only 5 grains and got all sorts of illnesses. Who dared to say that they didn't have any difficulties in their lives? Over time, the Chin family's status in the village gradually rose. Even the old Ox family, which had the most descendants in the east of the village and had more than 40 strong young men, also treated the Chin family's 3 members with great respect. 3 years ago, the Chin family's silly boy was swindled out of a large yellow ox. Several of the Ox family's brats mocked and ridiculed him. After being caught by the old Ox family, each of them was beaten several times, wailing like ghosts and howling like wolves. There were still some clever people who hurried to find the Chin family's male master. After he arrived, he stopped the old master, who was really angry. According to the old master, if it wasn't for Mr. Chin saving my life, I would have died by now. You bunch of ungrateful little bastards. After the incident, the Chin family's status in the village rose even higher. On the surface, everyone respected them, but when they saw the Chin family's boy, they couldn't help but shake their heads in their hearts. They thought to themselves that he looked like a decent lad, but they didn't expect him to be so stubborn. Not only was he swindled, but he also refused to admit it. He insisted that it was a betrothal gift for his future wife, and he was waiting for her to come back and marry him. Because of this, the surrounding matchmakers visited him several times in the past 2 years, but they were all rebuffed. After he was chased out of the Chin family, he added fuel to the fire, causing the Chin family's boy's reputation to become more and more disreputable in the surrounding villages. Gradually, no family had the thought of marrying off their daughter. They were afraid that their precious daughter would never be able to raise her head after marrying into the Chin family. Chapter 1606. In the past, Chin Yu had been too engrossed in the little fairy maiden and had fallen off the cow's back into the water. Now, 3 years had passed, and he had grown into a young man in his teens. He was tall, and his skin was dark, making him seem even more robust. He was a well-liked young man. Otherwise, he wouldn't have had matchmakers visiting him one after another when he had just reached marriageable age in the countryside. Of course, the Chin family's solid financial situation and their status in the surrounding villages were also important factors. Ever since he had given away his family's large cow, little Chin no longer tended cows. He began to learn how to identify herbs from his father. At the time, he had said that since the girl had accepted his betrothal gift, she could be considered his wife. In order to support his family in the future, he couldn't muddle through his days. He had to learn his family skills so that he wouldn't suffer when taking care of his wife and children. Because of this, little Chin Yu didn't suffer a beating from both his parents when he lost his family's large cow. He thought of it as spending some money to enlighten his son. Today, little Chin Yu returned from the mountains. The basket on his back was filled with all sorts of herbs. His luck was quite good this time. He had dug up a wild ginseng in a cave in the mountains. From the smell of it, he could tell it wasn't young. Of course, he already knew the principle of not showing off one's wealth. He hid the wild ginseng in the middle of the basket and surrounded it with several other smelly herbs, so that others wouldn't smell the ginseng. Gathering herbs in the mountains for money was one of the sources of income for mountain dwellers. Although the people of this area were simple and honest, they still had to be wary of others. This was what his mother said. Little Chin Yu felt it was reasonable. It wasn't until he left the mountains and arrived at a familiar path that he let out a sigh of relief. He smiled. If he brought this ginseng back, he would definitely be able to sell it for a high price. He quickened his pace. When he entered the village, little Chin Yu felt a bit strange. Normally, the villagers would gather here and chat to pass the time, but today he didn't see a single one. Not only that, but he also didn't see a single person in the village. This caused little Chin Yu to frown. He hoped that something bad had happened. Ox Village at the foot of the mountain wasn't large. Soon he passed through more than half the village. He could faintly hear some voices, as if many people were gathered together. After turning around a large tree, little Chin Yu's heart skipped a beat. He ran over. This was because almost everyone in the village had gathered outside his house. "I'm back!" No one knew who shouted, but the air suddenly became silent. Countless gazes turned to fall on him. This was the first time in his life that Chin Brat realized that a gaze could be so scorching hot. It was as if his entire body was on fire. In particular, there were some youngsters in the village who didn't have a good relationship with him. Now their eyes were bloodshot, and envy was written all over their faces. From the looks of it, it didn't seem like a bad thing. Little Chin subconsciously slowed down and coughed lightly. "Uncles, may I ask, what happened to my family?" Old Man Yo, who had the loudest voice in the east of the village, knocked on his pipe with a face full of joy. He walked over and heavily patted Chin Brat's shoulder. "You Brat, you're really good." This old man knew that you were an honest child and would definitely not lie. Ha! I really didn't expect that old ox would actually be able to see the person in the painting before I die. No, she's even more beautiful than in the painting. She's as beautiful as the fairy that I heard about when I went to the county city 30 years ago." This loud voice was like a broken gong. Several old fellows who were usually unconvinced and loved to argue with old man Nyo now all nodded their heads. It was rare that they didn't have any different opinions. Instead, they all agreed with his words. They thought that although old man Nyo had taken the opportunity to boast about his trip to the county city 30 years ago, his words weren't wrong at all. This Chin brat must have accumulated 8 lifetimes of good karma. He actually managed to exchange a large yellow cow for such a wife. Thinking about the rumors in the village these past years, these old fellows thought that when they returned, they would definitely give the boys of their family a few ruthless slaps on the face and kick them, calling them trash. That girl passed by our village in the past. So why didn't you guys meet her? Such a good wife. Yet you couldn't find her even when the sun was up. She ended up in old Chin's family, causing old Nyo's family to lose all face. Little boy Chin rubbed his head. "Grandpa Nyo, just what is going on? I'm still confused." Old man Nyo laughed out loud. "Don't ask. You'll know when you get home. What a good fortune. What a great fortune." The crowd parted. Little boy Chin walked to the entrance of his house. He immediately saw the large yellow cow tied outside the door. His eyes brightened. Without saying anything, he quickly walked in. Then he saw his father and mother in the main hall, their faces cramped but full of smiles. Sitting across from them was a sage-like old Taoist. With just a glance, one could tell that he was a very capable old Taoist. His hair was white as snow, and he was smiling as he stroked his beard. Little boy Chin's eyes turned to look at the girl standing behind the old Taoist. Although 3 years had passed and she had grown into a slender and elegant girl, he still recognized her at first glance. This was the little fairy maiden that had asked him for the yellow cow. His face flushed red. He took 2 steps forwards. You finally come." He rubbed his hands together, not knowing what to say. Mother Chin pulled at him. She smiled and said, "Old immortal, this is my son. His surname is Chin, and his name is you. Do you think it's him?" Father Chin nodded. "Marriage is an important matter that must be confirmed. If there's a mistake, it will be a great deal of trouble." They had been husband and wife for dozens of years, so they certainly understood each other's thoughts. They were extremely satisfied with this girl in front of them, but this fairy maiden that fell from the heavens left them restless. It was best to be a bit more cautious. The old Taoist laughed. He looked at Chin Yu and bowed. "Don't worry. This poor Taoist has already chosen him. My disciple was betrothed to the Chin family's young master." He turned around and looked at Li Ruhua, who was blushing and not saying a word. His heart skipped a beat, but he immediately felt great. "My dear disciple, I brought you to Ox Village from so far away just to keep the marriage promise from back then. Since you accepted Big Yellow as a betrothal gift, you should be married to the Chin family's young master. Are you willing to do this?" Deep in Li Ruhua's eyes, a trace of struggle flashed, but it disappeared in an instant. Her face flushed red, and she bowed. "I will follow teacher's arrangements." Taoist Cloudy Mist laughed, extremely carefree. "Good. Then I will make the decision for you and betroth you to the Chin family's young master." He stood up and said, "My 2 in-laws, before I came to Ox Village, I calculated the 8 characters of my horoscope. 3 days from now is the best date. If you 2 have no objections, then how about we set the wedding date for that day?" "Great." Chin Yu blurted out. Outside the courtyard, there was a burst of laughter, but it was hard to hide the envy in this laughter. Father Chin and Mother Chin nodded in agreement. After the Taoist stayed behind to eat lunch, he stood up and left with Li Ruhua. He said that he would come to Clear Cool Monastery halfway up Xiaoyang Mountain in 3 days to welcome the bride. In the blink of an eye, 3 days passed. The entertainment troupe that Father Chin had specially invited from the county town rushed straight to Xiaoliang Mountain. Outside and inside the village, anyone that knew about the Chin family's wedding would come without invitation. Along the way, there were many onlookers, making the scene extremely lively. Soon, the doors to Clear Cool Monastery opened wide. Normally, the monastery master was extremely imposing. Even if the county magistrate came to visit, he would still ignore him. But today he was dressed in new clothes, and his face was full of smiles. As he greeted the people of Ox Village who came to welcome the bride, he displayed 120% enthusiasm. This caused the originally nervous crowd to relax, and then they began to feel even more envious. It seemed that the rumors in the village that the old Taoist and that Fairy Maiden were true, celestial beings weren't false at all. Otherwise, why would such a great figure like the monastery master of Clear Cool Monastery act like this? Perhaps a country bumpkin didn't have much experience, but he didn't lack any intelligence. The old Taoist sat down and accepted Qinyu and the bride's bow. He smiled. Today, this poor Taoist congratulates the two of you on your marriage. In the future, you should love each other and spend 100 years together. After welcoming the bride, the procession returned to Ox Village, blowing the trumpets and beating the drums. The old Taoist politely declined the invitation to the wedding feast. He said that it was the custom of his hometown and that the bride's family wouldn't come today. But during this period of time, he would be temporarily cultivating at Clear Cool Monastery. In the future, there would surely be a chance for him to visit. After everyone left, the old Taoist waved his hand and sent away the respectfully bowing monastery master. Then he stood up and walked into the back hall. With a light cough, the old Taoist bowed. I have already married Li Ruhua to the Qin family's son. May I ask Senior to tell me what to do? Several breaths of time later, a voice appeared out of nowhere. I understand. After these 3 words were spoken, there was no more sound. Taoist Cloudy Mist, who had just escaped death, waited for a long time before slowly standing up. He couldn't help but wipe away the cold sweat on his forehead. He thought that this person didn't seem to be in a good mood. Although this person didn't reveal anything and didn't target him in the slightest, he could faintly sense it. This caused Taoist Cloudy Mist's heart to tremble, as if a great catastrophe were about to befall him. After hesitating again and again, he didn't dare to disturb him any further. He bowed once more and took several steps back. The Qin family held a grand banquet. They invited all the guests, regardless of whether they knew them or not. As long as they gave them a congratulatory gift, they could enter the banquet and eat their fill. The several youths of the village had already been incomparably envious of Qinyu, and after being ruthlessly taught a lesson by their old man, they decided that they would drink Qinyu to the point where he wouldn't be able to consummate his marriage. Luckily, Qinyu's father was already prepared for this. He gave Qinyu a pill in advance to relieve the effects of alcohol. After the several youths drank too much, they began to cry and make a ruckus. The old man felt that they had lost face, so he used the rod to teach them a lesson. After repeatedly apologizing, he was dragged away. It could be imagined that these people today wouldn't live comfortably for the next period of time. After this matter, the pressure on Qinyu was greatly reduced. But after the guests dispersed, he still drank until his face was flushed red and the smell of alcohol gushed out from his nose and mouth. It wasn't that the villagers didn't want to, but that after experiencing the attitude of Clear Cool Monastery, they didn't dare to. How could a fairy maiden of an immortal family be restrained by common logic? If they didn't do something, there might be a big problem. No one wanted to provoke trouble. Qinyu staggered. After bidding farewell to his parents, he walked towards his room. As he was about to enter, he nearly tripped. When he looked down, he saw that there was a bamboo slip on the ground. He was a bit confused. He subconsciously picked it up, but he didn't have the mind to look at it. He placed it in his chest pocket and pushed open the door. At this time, he heard a dissatisfied, cold snort in his ears. Then, His field of vision fell into darkness. Then light lit up. Qin Yu's eyes widened, and he discovered that he was sitting in a side room of clear, cool monastery. In front of him was an old Taoist with the air of a transcendent being. The old Taoist was smiling at him and Li Ruhua, who had already changed her hair into a woman's bun. He was a bit confused, but he didn't know where the problem was. His memories were hazy, but he vaguely knew that today he was accompanying the bride to visit her elders. Good. The two of you must work harder and strive to bear fruit as soon as possible so that you won't disappoint this marriage. Everything in front of him darkened and then brightened. Qin Yu discovered that he was sitting in a newly built residence, holding a bamboo slip in his hands. In front of him was a young boy who was hugging his thigh, mumbling out his name as he called out Daddy. Li Ruhua's body had become even more plump and round. She walked over and pulled him back. Little fellow, don't disturb your daddy's reading. Mother will accompany you outside to play. Qin Yu reached out a hand. Just as he was about to say something, his field of vision darkened and then brightened. He discovered that he was examining someone's pulse. In front of him was a woman who was constantly coughing. She anxiously asked, "Dr. Qin, am I all right?" "Auntie, don't worry. You just caught a bit of a cold. It's fine." A calm voice echoed out from the side. A youth walked over and bowed. "Father, I looked over the medical records just now and also examined your pulse. If you were worried, you wanted to take a look. Did you come to the same conclusion as me?" Qin Yu nodded. "It is indeed a cold illness." Before he could say anything else, his field of vision darkened once more. When he opened his eyes, he was standing beside a small grave mound. He held a bamboo slip in his hands, and beside him was a man and a woman, both dressed in mourning. "Father, Mother has already been laid to rest. You must be more open-minded. Your son will be filial to you in the future and won't let you suffer." The bride nodded to her father-in-law. "That's right. You haven't slept for 3 or 4 days. Come back with us and rest well." Only then did Qin Yu feel a deep exhaustion wash over him like a tide. His field of vision darkened and he fell backwards. When he opened his eyes once more, he had already returned home. His son and wife were waiting at his side. As they saw him wake up, their eyes turned red. "Father, you must take care of yourself. If something happens to you, how will we continue living?" Qin Yu looked up at the ceiling. His heart was filled with sorrow, but there were also some puzzles in his mind. How had he lived his life? Many of his memories were blurry. It was like he had experienced them before, but it was also like he had imagined them. Even the appearance of the woman who had accompanied him his entire life was beginning to become blurry. Was I confused? For the next 10 years, Qin Yu lived alone in his old courtyard. His son and wife were filial and gave birth to a pair of children. They were like 2 little people from a painting. They circled around him all day, constantly shouting, "Hug Grandpa" and "Hug Grandpa." There were several old men in the village who were around his age. All of them were jealous of him, saying that he was just lucky. In the past, he had relied on a large cow to deceive a fairy-like wife into giving birth to such a handsome son and a pair of beautiful grandchildren. All of them were filled with envy and jealousy. Qin Yu leaned against a tree and chuckled. He felt proud and satisfied. But in his mind, the memories of the woman who had accompanied him his entire life had become blurry. Perhaps she really was a very beautiful person. Then Qin Yu lowered his head and continued to look through the bamboo slip in his hands. He had already read it for many years, but he still couldn't understand what was recorded on it. But his intuition told him that this jade slip was extremely important. It was something that he absolutely couldn't lose. He had to keep it by his side until the day he closed his eyes. Chapter 1607. On Nangstone, beneath the yellow millet tree. Li Ruhua's face was deathly pale. She bit her lips and her body tottered. She stubbornly stared at the small memorial tablet across from her, not hiding the resentment in her heart at all. A cold laugh sounded out from the memorial tablet. Don't look at me like that. It looks like you've suffered a great loss, but in my opinion, you've gained a great advantage. You should be happy in secret. Li Ruhua bit down on her lips, her breathing heavy. But in the end, she didn't lose her mind and seek her own death. Your goal has been achieved. Can I leave now? Her voice was hoarse and her body shivered. She was on the verge of collapse. Fog tumbled over the surface of the memorial tablet. Of course, but before I leave, I must remind you not to forget your current status. Puff! Li Ruhua spat out a mouthful of blood. She looked deeply at the tablet and then turned to leave. Shwa! Her figure flashed, and she vanished without a trace. The voice from the memorial tablet, coldly, sneered again. It didn't care about Li Ruhua's gaze at all. He had merely borrowed the power of a marriage and borrowed half of her destiny. Compared to what he had done in the past, this was already very benevolent. Humph! She's gone. Come back. Space twisted, and Li Mu appeared out of thin air. He bitterly smiled and helplessly hung his head, looking listless and listless. Don't pretend to be pitiful. You know it's useless. To be able to preserve your life is already a very fortunate matter. Don't you think so? Li Mu bowed. You are right. The memorial tablet jumped up and patted his head. Remember what you should do. Don't disappoint me. I'm leaving. See you later. Shwa! The memorial tablet vanished without a trace. Li Mu still maintained his bowing posture. After a long time, he let out a deep breath and slowly straightened himself. His expression was calm. There was no trace of the bitter smile and helplessness from before. Instead, he frowned and revealed a thoughtful look. Nank Nation, Ox Village in Xiaoliang Mountain. The old man of the Qin family, who had lived for 100 years, finally closed his eyes. He didn't suffer from illness or pain. Even if he slept after dinner, he would lose his breath in his dreams. 3 days after the coffin was laid to rest, the cries of the descendants of the Qin clan shook the heavens. Accompanied by the low growls of the young men in the village, the heavy coffin was slowly lifted all the way to the Qin clan cemetery. At the same time, halfway up the Xiaoliang mountain, the Qingliang temple's door opened with a soft sigh. The white-haired Taoist priest Cloudy Mist walked out of the temple. He was followed by the obviously old and weak temple master, who was more respectful than ever, and a group of Qingliang temple's Taoists. Young Master Qin has passed away. Follow me and perform a ritual to help young Master Qin enter reincarnation as soon as possible. Yes. Taoist Cloudy Mist rode the wind, and Taoist Qingliang temple followed respectfully behind him. They arrived at the Qin family's graveyard, which immediately attracted many exclamations. The Qin clan's descendants had long since seen the old immortal's portrait. They were all shocked and hastily bowed respectfully. You don't have to be so courteous. This humble Taoist and your Qin clan have quite a bit of fate. He stopped there and didn't say anything else. In fact, Taoist Cloudy Mist didn't know the truth either. However, there was one thing that he was very clear about. The seemingly ordinary Qin family was definitely not ordinary. Although young Master Qin had died, he still didn't want to provoke them in the slightest. The ritual was successfully completed under Taoist Cloudy Mist's leadership. The coffin was buried and the round grave was completed. The filial son and daughter knelt on the ground and cried bitterly. The paper money was ignited, and a gust of wind rolled up the ashes and scattered them in all directions. The Taoist Qingliang temple's Taoist priest had already been sent away. Taoist Cloudy Mist stood in front of the grave and looked at the 2 round grave mounds in front of him. His eyes were slightly obscure, and there was even more confusion and curiosity in them. However, he was very clear that in this world it was better not to know many things than to know. Curiosity could kill a person. Humph, you're smart. Otherwise, so what if you've lived for a few more decades? You're going to die today. A cold laugh resounded in his mind. Taoist Cloudy Mist was frightened and immediately bowed. His lips moved, but he didn't know what to say. He was terrified in his heart, but after a few decades, he was a little excited to hear this voice again. From today onwards, you will cultivate on Xiaoliang Mountain and protect the Qin bloodline for generations to come. There is no need for you to meddle in everything. You can decide what you want to do. As the voice fell, a cultivation method appeared in his mind. Taoist Cloudy Mist glanced at it, and his face flushed red with excitement. He knelt down towards the grave mounds and respectfully kowtowed. The descendants of the Qin family were frightened. Before they could speak, Taoist Cloudy Mist waved his hand and interrupted them. Sir Qin is this poor Taoist's benefactor. There is no need to ask about the specifics. In the future, your Qin family will receive my protection. This will not change even for 1,000 years. Demonic sect Master Night Demon's living courtyard. In an underground chamber. Qin Yu was sitting cross-legged. His eyelids moved several times before he slowly opened them. After a brief moment of confusion, he soon composed himself. His eyes slowly swept around. "You're awake?" A figure appeared. His complexion was gloomy. It was clear he wasn't in a good mood. Qin Yu's heart relaxed. He rubbed his temples and said, "What is going on? I have already entered Nank and Golden Millet realms, but why don't I have any memories of them? Moreover," he stood up and looked down at himself. Besides a bit of tiredness, as if he had slept for a long time, there wasn't anything different about him. Qin Yu looked at Little Meaty, waiting for her to give him an explanation. Little Meaty coldly sneered. "What? I was responsible for sending you in. Do you think I can guarantee that you will obtain some harvests?" Her complexion became increasingly gloomy, and it was clear she was in an even worse mood. "Qin Yu, you need to understand that this is your own problem." He didn't know what was wrong with her, but it was as if she had eaten gunpowder. Qin Yu was a bit puzzled, but his intuition told him that it was best not to provoke her, otherwise he really might suffer a great deal. So, Qin Yu took a step back and nodded. "All right, this is my problem. It has nothing to do with you." This caused her anger to reach the edge of eruption. She had already planned to make this bastard Qin Yu suffer a little, but now she choked on her words. Her face flushed red, and she angrily snorted and left. "Qin, you thought that it was a close call." He stood up and followed. After leaving the chamber, Little Meaty didn't stop. She walked straight out of the courtyard and pushed open the door. She saw the sect Master Night Demon standing outside. "Mississippi," the sect Master Night Demon bowed. As he sensed Little Meaty's gloomy expression, his eyes turned icy cold as they fell on Qin Yu. If an extreme ruler really wanted to go all out, Qin Yu might not be afraid. But this sort of inexplicable gaze left him speechless. "Even if I was wrong, shouldn't you at least tell me where I was wrong?" Women, women, no matter what their cultivation level was or how long they had lived in the world, they were always unpredictable and temperamental creatures. He couldn't provoke them, he really couldn't. Humph! Little Meaty coldly coughed. The sect master's complexion changed. He quickly looked away, took a deep breath, and bowed towards Qin Yu. "Son-in-law, this subordinate has offended you. I ask that you don't blame me." Humph! Little Meaty coldly coughed again. The sect Master Night Demon's forehead dripped with sweat. He didn't know whether to stand or not. Qin Yu's eyes revealed a bit of schadenfreude. He thought, "Now you understand my feelings a little." Luckily, Little Meaty didn't seem to be truly angry. After her cold cough, her complexion actually relaxed a little. Qin Yu frowned, thinking that she was far too difficult to serve. Little Meaty glared at him. Although she didn't say anything, her meaning was clear. "Do you want to die?" Qin Yu pretended not to see it. The sect Master Night Demon coughed. He respectfully said, "Miss, son-in-law, since you have come to the demon sect, I wonder if you can stay for a day or two so that this subordinate can express his gratitude." Little Meaty coldly said nothing. Qin Yu thought for a moment. He cupped his hands together and said, "Chief, I appreciate your good intentions, but I have the Western Wasteland Imperial Decree on my back and must arrive at the border army camp on time. It is not good for me to stay here any longer." The sect Master Knight Demon nodded in understanding. "If that's the case, then this subordinate will send Miss and son-in-law away." Little Meaty glanced at him and sneered. She grabbed Qin Yu and stepped away, instantly vanishing from sight. Wiping the cold sweat from his forehead, the sect Master Knight Demon stood up, a bitter smile on his face. After the Miss had awakened, it was as if she had become a completely different person. The way she looked at him sometimes caused even this peak sovereign powerhouse to feel a chill run down his spine. It was far too terrifying, but now he had finally grasped what the Miss liked and liked. Just now, although she seemed to be sneering, the truth was that her mood was much better. The sect Master Knight Demon stood up and shook his head. He thought that Marquis Zhongwu Ningqin was only a trivial early sovereign realm cultivator. So how could he be worthy of the Miss? He also had no idea why the Miss would value him so much. He took a deep breath, suppressing the thoughts that he shouldn't be thinking about as a vassal. The sect Master Knight Demon turned and returned to the courtyard, entering a secret chamber without stopping. When he arrived in a corner, he bowed. Space twisted and the memorial tablet appeared once more. However, the fog that lingered on its surface was much thinner. Even the remnant soul within had fallen into a deep slumber, unable to respond. The sect Master Knight Demon had a worried expression. He looked at the memorial tablet several times and then put away the secret technique, allowing it to disappear once more. Nank Nation, Qin Family Cemetery. Li Mu's figure appeared out of thin air, standing between the old and the new round tombs. He stared intently, but it was as if he was looking at flowers through the fog. It was obvious that there was a problem here, but the other party didn't try to hide it at all. It was so obvious that it was right in front of him. It would be a lie to say that he wasn't curious. As long as he waved his hand, he could open the tomb and erase the fog in front of him. But after thinking about it again and again, Li Mu sighed. In the end, he didn't take that step. He turned around and disappeared. After several breaths of time, Daoist cloudy mist rushed to the Qin family cemetery. But no matter how he searched, he couldn't find anything wrong. But just now, the array formation he laid down clearly sensed something. Could it be that he had made a mistake? At this time, Li Mu was already in Ox Village. He stood in the air above the courtyard in the west of the village, looking down at the Qin family descendants. They were all ordinary people, and there was nothing special about them. At most, their destiny was better, and they would be rewarded in the future. He went through so much trouble just to seize half of Li Ruhua's destiny. I always feel that things are not so simple. Li Mu touched his chin. With a thought, he left Nank State. He was now the master of Nank Stone and the Yellow Grain Tree. Although he only had half of it, it was enough for him to incarnate into the rules of heaven and earth here. He could enter and leave with just a thought. It was even easier to deceive other senses and not be detected. The reason why Daoist Cloudy Mist could feel a trace of unusual aura was that Li Mu deliberately let him notice it and then take a look at this old Daoist who had suddenly risen on the road of cultivation. But in the end, he still found nothing, which made him quite disappointed. When his divine soul returned to his body, Li Mu opened his eyes and murmured, "I've never lacked patience. Then I'll wait and see. The truth will come to light one day." There was a knock on the door. Li Mu exhaled and revealed a helpless look. Sure enough, when he did something wrong, he would have to pay for it. He had already expected this day, so he didn't think of running away. He got up and opened the door. Li Ruhua stood outside the door with a cold face, but the way she looked at him was not cold, just a little complicated. Li Mu sighed. "Come in and have a cup of tea." Li Ruhua was expressionless. "Do you think I'm still in the mood to drink tea now?" Both of them were asking questions. Li Mu thought for a moment. After all, she had suffered a big loss, so he decided to take a step back. It's okay if you don't drink tea. I'll give you some compensation for this matter. Li Ruhua bit her lip. Li Mu raised his hand and swore. I promise that before you entered Ox Village, my connection with Nank Stone and Yellow Grain Tree had been completely cut off, so I don't know what exactly happened. He said it with sincerity and certainty. But of course it was all false. As the ruler of this realm, even if he was not there at that time, he could still go back in time and see anything he wanted to know. Li Ruhua took a deep look at him and said, There's no need for compensation. I just want you to promise that this matter will never be known by anyone except you and me. Okay. Li Mu nodded solemnly. Li Ruhua turned around and left. Li Mu said behind her, Are you going to continue looking for Barbarian Emperor? My suggestion is that you should return to the central wilderness as soon as possible. Li Ruhua didn't look back. I know what to do. Her figure flew far away, disappearing from sight. Li Mu closed the door, returned to the table, and sat down. He picked up the teacup and took a sip. A faint smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. What a stubborn little girl. But as that person said, losing half of your luck might be an advantage for you. Sometimes one couldn't just look at the surface. And he just happened to be someone in this world who was best at observing the essence of things through the surface. Loyal Marshal Marquis Ning Qin. Interesting, really interesting. But thinking about it, even a rare creature like the Barbarian Emperor had arrived at this time. Was there anything that couldn't happen? The emergence of a new era meant that there would be a great upheaval between the heavens and earth. But to Li Mu, wasn't this also an opportunity, the 13th floor, the white jade capital above the highest heavens? He also wanted to see the scenery up there. The supernatural abilities of flesh and blood were always convincing. For instance, when she pulled on Qin Yu's hand and took a step forward, the two of them returned to the airship that was rushing towards the border army. From beginning to end, including the 4/4 claws from the Imperial Palace, no one noticed anything at all. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that this was a marvelous technique. Let's go. After throwing down these words, the flesh and blood figure vanished. Although her mood was a little better, she still couldn't help but feel annoyed when she faced Qin Yu. She always felt that she was so considerate and considerate, but Qin Yu was just an ignorant blockhead. No matter how she calculated this, she had suffered a great loss. Chapter 1608. Qin Yu sat down and poured himself a cup of tea. He slowly drank several mouthfuls, and when the tea reached the bottom, he poured himself another cup. He repeated this a few times, drinking a bellyful of tea. However, he still couldn't figure out what exactly happened in Nank and Yellow Millet regions. There seemed to be some memories in his mind, but they were blurry and extremely faint. It was like the muddy waters of the Yellow River that reflected the scenery of the mountains and rivers. No matter how hard he tried to open his eyes, all he could see was a blur. Even so, the scenery still existed. It was just that Qin Yu couldn't see it clearly, but that didn't mean it was an illusion. Stone Tower. He spoke in a low voice, but there was no response. It was as if that distant stone pagoda that had once again seen the light after experiencing the darkness had once again fallen into a deep slumber. Or perhaps he had no choice but to sleep to avoid falling into an incomparably dangerous situation. Qin Yu was a bit annoyed, but as he thought about it, his complexion gradually calmed down. When it came to sucking up to someone's thigh, there were always gains and losses. He had to carefully consider his limits. At the very least, it was still within the scope of what he could accept. Well, to be more precise, these words were a bit hypocritical. If it were anyone else in Qin Yu's shoes, then even if they took 100 steps back, they still wouldn't feel like they were losing out. He had temporarily suppressed the investigation of what happened in Nank and Golden Millet. But this didn't mean that he had given up. Take a step back and wait for the right time. There is no need to commit crimes against the wind and make things difficult for yourself and others. He took a deep breath and let go of a worry in his heart. Then he closed his eyes and used the tea in his belly to observe the differences. Even though his memories were blurry and he had no idea what had happened, there were no obvious changes to his body. However, he felt that there was still a change, just that it was not obvious. In the end, he came up empty-handed. This caused Chinyu to sigh and completely give up. Since little Meaty was unwilling to let him know the inside story, then with her methods, she would be able to keep it a secret. Forget it. Since it's all just wishful thinking, I might as well let it all go. Go and cultivate. Western Wilderness, Imperial Palace. The great emperor above the ninth heaven looked at the jade scroll in his hand and crushed it into powder. His expression was indifferent and his eyes were even colder. But this coldness wasn't directed at Chinyu. The Marquis Loyal Marshal, Ning Qin, had nothing to do with the new Goliath sovereign. He could already confirm that this was enough. But that third-generation disciple of the Li family, who acted recklessly because of her extraordinary status, had probably forgotten her current status. No matter how dazzling she had been in the distant past, she was now just a little girl who hadn't even reached the emperor realm. He dared to make a deal with the emperor of a country and even tried to kill him in secret. Did he really think that he could deceive everyone and clear his name? The Central Wasteland's Li family was indeed a great mountain. Even when facing a country, they still had confidence and confidence. But that referred to the entire Li family, not a single person. Li Ruhua's weight was far from enough. If she was smart enough, she would directly return to the Middle Wasteland. This debt would be noted down for now. There would definitely be a day when she would get back at him. Since you don't want to leave, then don't leave. Within the cage, lightning flashed. Countless bolts of lightning exploded, turning into a pool of lightning that was not very large, but had a majestic aura. Li Siji was trapped within. All of his hair turned to ash. He screamed, and his face twisted. Lightning poured into his mouth and nose, wanting to extinguish all life. If it weren't for his current strange state, where he seemed weak but his vitality was boundless, he would have long since turned to ashes. Since the Marquis Loyal Marshal, Ning Qin, was fine, then something would happen to him. This was a simple truth. The boiling of the lightning pool represented the anger in His Majesty's heart. The reason why he did not appear personally was because this crazy third prince was no longer worth his time. After a long time, the thunder stopped. The twitching Li Siji slumped to the ground. He gasped for breath, like a big fish that had been tossed onto the shore. His eyes were red, but there was no fear in them. Rather, there was a bit of confusion. This shouldn't have happened. This shouldn't have happened, Li Siji whispered. The redness in his eyes became increasingly deep, like 2 seas of blood, so deep that one couldn't see the end. Western Wasteland, Long Island. It was called Chang because it was really long. It was 7,900 miles long, but the narrowest part was only 3 or 4 miles. Standing here, one could only see blue waves on both sides. It was located in the Thousand Islands county of the Western Wilderness. Its territory was divided into a large lake that was 100,000 miles wide. There were countless islands scattered about. Thus, it was also called the Thousand Islands River. Thousand Islands River. Hee, if someone still mentions this name, then they are either a young junior that wants to show off, or they are really old and experienced. Old Masterman set off from Chang Island and took a boat to cruise the lake. Along the way, he admired the scenery and sighed with emotion. There was regret that he had to abandon his old home for many years. But there was also a sense of complacency and pride that came from revisiting an old place that had changed. What he was proud of was that even after so many years, he was still able to live peacefully in Chongqing. He could watch flowers bloom and wilt, and he was still a carefree person in the world. As for those great figures who had bared their teeth at him back then, all of them had died long ago and disappeared from the world. Their cultivation of the great path had been cultivated to nothing in the end. Opening his mouth, old Masterman suddenly swept away the melancholy of leaving his hometown. His heart was at ease, and he even had the aura of a free and easy home where his heart was at peace. Looking at his son, who was frowning and looking lost, he couldn't help but hate him for not living up to his expectations. She was just a coquettish fox. Why did he have to worry about her? She had really embarrassed the old Masterman family. But after all, he knew what it was like for a young man to know his worries for the first time. These were all experiences that he had to go through. He thought angrily for a while, but he didn't say much. There was still a long way to go. When he saw more and experienced more, he would naturally be able to cultivate a heart that wouldn't be shaken by external things. If he didn't even have this level of skill, how could he talk about longevity and coexist with heaven and earth? It was just a joke. Seeing that the border army camp was just around the corner and the general and madam had yet to return, Saint Baidu had a calm expression as if he knew everything, but in reality he was panicking and couldn't sleep at night. An imperial general led an army to guard the border. Leaving halfway was already a taboo. Not returning for a long time was even more taboo. Now he was just covering it up and no one had pointed it out. But once he arrived at the border army camp, he naturally couldn't avoid it. Some things were just like how the Empire and the Western barbarians openly smuggled goods for profit, but they were done in a way that couldn't be criticized. Now, the general was seen as a thorn in the side of the later Yi family. If he was found out and suddenly attacked, even His Majesty would find it difficult to take care of him. After all, some rules in the army still had to be followed. Otherwise, if they were too biased, how could they convince the masses in the future? Wu Shuai turned a blind eye to the general, but when the storm of playing the zither ended, he also lost a layer of face. It was just that the military left some face for this general who had just been torn apart by His Majesty and didn't officially reprimand him. But seeing the general suffer, Wu Shuai was sure to be happy. He might even take the initiative to add fuel to the fire. Otherwise, if he didn't do anything, then, as the Western Border Army's Grand Marshal, he would truly be treated as a clay bodhisattva who couldn't even protect himself. The more he thought about it, the more anxious he became. True Saint Baiyu's mouth was filled with blisters, and he felt a terrible pain whenever he moved. He could only hide in his room all day and pretend that everything was fine so that he wouldn't have to face the probing words of the soldiers. But time couldn't fool anyone, and he couldn't avoid it. Even if he intentionally delayed, the speed of the airship was just barely enough to arrive at the border army camp within the time limit set by the military. But he had arrived. True Saint Baiyu clenched his teeth and pushed open the door with blisters in his mouth. Whether this was a blessing or a curse, if he hit his head, he would suffer this knife. Seeing this highly regarded advisor of Marquis Loyal Marshal in such a pitiful state, the generals gathered on the airship all felt their hearts skip a beat. Then they groaned inwardly. Starting from Blue River, these people had already been labeled as Marquis Loyal Marshal Ningqin. If something happened to their commander, then they would also be implicated. The more informed generals vaguely knew that Marquis Loyal Marshal Ningqin and the Yi family were like fire and water. Their complexions had already turned ashen. They weren't familiar with this marquis, so they couldn't help but feel a bit of resentment in their hearts. It was fine for him to bring his wife back to his mother's family. After all, this was a glorious moment, and he had to go to his wife's family to show off. This was also human nature. But because of this, he had actually delayed for so many days. Even when the army arrived at the camp, he still hadn't returned to the army. This was because he didn't know the gravity of the situation. To put it more seriously, it could even be said that he relied on His Majesty's favor and didn't place military rules in his eyes. Such a commander, even if he was Marquis Loyal Marshal, wouldn't have a good ending in the future. He wasn't worth following. Facing everyone's eyes, True Saint Baiyu took a deep breath. His lips moved, but before he could speak, he felt a searing pain and his face couldn't help but twitch. At this time, there was the sound of footsteps behind him, followed by a calm voice. "Since you've all come, then let's wait a bit. Once Marshal Wu sends someone over, we can return to the camp." True Saint Baiyu took a deep breath. He tried his best to maintain his composure. He turned and respectfully bowed. "Greetings, Marquis!" At this moment he nearly wept. "Marquis, you came just in time. If you were any closer, I wouldn't have been able to make it in time. But, my dear Marquis, can we not play so excitedly next time? My little heart really can't stand it." On the deck of the airship, the generals all fell to their knees. "Greetings, Marquis." Qin Yu waved his hand, a faint smile on his face. "I left for a while, and then came back because I was busy cultivating, so I didn't have time to properly meet with you all. But it doesn't matter. In the future, you will all be in the army, and there will be opportunities to get closer." His eyes swept over everyone, a faint smile on his face. But the words he spoke caused a cold sweat to appear on everyone's foreheads and their backs. "I have only managed an ordinary army. After all, I am someone who left halfway through my career, so I cannot compare with you generals who have been in the army for so many years. But I only have one request, and that is that all military orders must be obeyed. If you can do it, then I will guarantee you great riches and honor in the future. Otherwise, stand out as soon as possible. While you and I still have a chance, let's part on good terms so that in the future my military laws won't be merciless. I dare not. I will fulfill my duty and act according to your orders." Just as everyone stood up, they all fell to their knees. Qin Yu smiled and nodded. "Stand up. With everyone's words, I can rest assured." He turned his head and looked at Bai Su, whose mouth was full of fire bubbles and who was in a sorry state. "Write it down. In the future, if I forget it, just remind me who is here today." Bai Yu solemnly nodded. He straightened his back, secretly pleased with himself. He thought to himself, "You bunch of rude and unreasonable bastards of the army, you weren't respectful to me before. But now you know who your grandfather is?" He stood up and looked up. His eyes were especially earnest as he swept his eyes over every face on the deck. These generals who had slaughtered their way through the army for so many years to reach their current status felt as if there was a blade on their backs and even more regret. But their faces remained calm, not revealing anything at all. Qin Yu nodded inwardly. He thought that there was a reason why the generals of the Western Wilderness were able to stand out from the crowd. They weren't just a bunch of good-for-nothings. Soon, a messenger hurried in from the Western Border Army camp. "I have come on the orders of Marshal Wu to welcome Great General back to the Border Army." Qin Yu nodded. "Concerning the arrangement of the army, what orders does Marshal Wu have?" The messenger's forehead dripped with sweat. His tone became even more respectful. "Marshal Wu has ordered that Great General bring back the army. Everything will be arranged by you, and the martial tent will not interfere." True Saint Bai Yu's lips curled up in a cold sneer. Compared to when he and the general led 100,000 troops to reinforce the Western Border Army, the treatment they received was as different as the heavens and earth. After all, those 100,000 troops hadn't even been warmed in the general's hands before they had all been dispatched by the martial tent. Qin Yu cupped his hands together. "Thank you, Marshal. It would be impolite of me to refuse." He swept his eyes over the generals. "The mine is now my station. Follow the directions and go there. As for the supplies and expenses of the camp, I will ask Marshal Wu for them." "Yes, Lord Marquis." Qin Yu stood up. "Let's go. I will follow you to the camp and pay my respects to Marshal Wu." When a great general returned to the camp, it was reasonable for him to pay his respects to the martial tent. Only then could it be considered proper etiquette. But today, in the eyes of all the generals of the Western Border Army camp, Marquis Loyal Marshal, who had sent away his 400,000 troops and only brought a few personal guards with him to the martial tent, was carrying the momentum of a thunderstorm to demand an explanation from the martial tent. After all, his previous words of, "I will ask Marshal Wu for the supplies and expenses of the camp," had already spread throughout the border army, revealing his sharpness. A third-class Marquis Loyal Marshal, a great general of the same rank. When Qin Yu returned to the border army camp, he could feel the difference in his status and the changes it brought. Along the way, all the generals he encountered bowed to the side of the road. Without any hindrance, he arrived at the martial tent. The personal guard guarding outside the martial tent took the initiative to bow. Without waiting for Qin Yu to speak, he said that the marshal and the various generals were already waiting inside. As he spoke, he bowed and reached out a hand to open the tent. Qin Yu stepped forwards. But at this time he suddenly frowned, a look of surprise in his eyes. In front of him, the tall martial tent guard who had bowed and opened the tent to invite him and still had his head bowed. But he punched out his fist. It was like a vast river bursting through a dam, sweeping away all living things. This was a ruler realm, an existence that stood at the peak of a mountain. His killing intent soared to the heavens. Before this guard attacked, Qin Yu hadn't sensed any abnormal aura. This person either cultivated a powerful secret art that could lock in his aura, or he had a treasure in his hand that could deceive the perception of the outside world. However, no matter what the truth was, it was no longer important. Qin Yu took a deep breath. He stepped forwards, and space instantly twisted. Countless tiny marks appeared from within. Dong! There was a heaven-shaking explosion, like a giant ox shaking a mountain. The martial tank guard that had just punched out vomited blood from his head and was sent flying far away. Chapter 1609. At the imperial capital's loyal Marshal Marquis mansion, when Qin Yu broke through to the next realm, he had thought of hiding himself. At the critical moment, he would use his initial realm cultivation to surprise his opponent. He knew that his opponent's expression would be wonderful at that time. But today, when he returned to the Western Border Army camp and saw the assassination attempt outside the commander's tent, he suddenly changed his original thoughts. Since he wanted the commander's tent to give him an explanation, the more important he was, the better. His cultivation realm was obviously a big factor. Cries of alarm sounded out one after another. With the sound of breaking air, several figures appeared, suppressing the assassin. He fell to the ground, sobbing blood, unable to stand up again. But it was obvious that he had already expected this. He knew that there was only one chance to assassinate him outside the commander's tent. Thus, he used his full strength and erupted with his strongest killing intent. He didn't think that loyal Marshal Marquis Ningqin would hide his strength so deeply. Although he only revealed his early sovereign realm cultivation, he was actually an extreme powerhouse. Since he failed to kill the assassin, he was naturally disappointed. But luckily he wouldn't die in vain. There would surely be a storm today. The assassin stuffily coughed. Blood flowed out from his orifices. A terrifying and wild strength erupted from his body. Humph! Wu Tongtian stepped forwards, arriving beside the assassin. He lifted his hand and pressed down. With a loud bang, countless rays of golden light bloomed. Like a giant mouth, it swallowed the assassin. Rumble, rumble. A deep rumbling sound filled the air, like thunder exploding in the distant skies. Golden light violently twisted. Wu Tongtian frowned, and a trace of paleness appeared on his face. But in the blink of an eye, he recovered. He turned his hand, and the golden light vanished. Outside the commander's tent, several figures appeared. They bowed to Wu Tongtian from afar and left. Their mission was to ensure the safety of the commander's tent. Now that the assassin had been killed, the investigation, appeasement, and pacification had nothing to do with them. Several figures appeared at the broken entrance of the commander's tent. Although Wu Tongtian had suppressed the assassin's indiscriminate destruction, Qin Yu didn't have any intention of protecting the commander's face. Of course, this was completely reasonable, and no one would criticize him. After all, he was a dignified Marquis-level border army general. For him to encounter an assassination outside the commander's tent was a joke in itself. Since he had already become a joke, there was naturally no need to talk about face. Yi Sang-do's face was as gloomy as water. His brows were tightly furrowed and his eyes were heavy. Jiang Qingzi glanced at Qin Yu. Seeing that he was safe and sound, he relaxed a little. Then he sighed with emotion. Zhao Chong's reaction was the most obvious. If not for the fact that the situation was inappropriate, he would have rushed forward and asked about Qin Yu's well-being. But even if he didn't move, there was enough emotion in his eyes to make people feel that he cared about Marquis Zhongwu. The other border army generals all lowered their heads. Even though their expressions were heavy, they didn't reveal the slightest bit of emotion to avoid provoking trouble. At the entrance of the messy commander's tent, there was a short period of silence. But in this silence, everyone's eyes were filled with shock as they looked at Qin Yu. Marquis Zhongwu, Ning Qin, actually had such a cultivation. The speed at which his cultivation rose and the degree to which he did so was hard to imagine. After all, when he left the Western Border Army and returned to the imperial capital, he was only at the saint level. Even if he had some hidden cards and methods, how could he be compared to what he was today? Just now, he had forcefully resisted the assassin's fist and was able to cause severe wounds. Just this point alone was enough to prove his current strength. This caused everyone to subconsciously think back to the news that came from the imperial capital. Marquis Zhongwu, Ning Qin, had made a breakthrough in his cultivation and received feedback from the destiny of the nation. He had been able to absorb so many incense sticks that he had set a new record. It was clear that Marquis Zhongwu's sudden rise in cultivation was related to this. Wu Tongtian opened his mouth to break the silence. He looked at Qin Yu, his expression solemn. Marquis Zhongwu, I guarantee that I will investigate this matter to the end and give you an explanation. No matter how much he cursed in his heart, he had to make a statement. The assassination had occurred outside the commander's tent, and the assassin had been hiding amongst the guards. Moreover, he had taken the initiative to step forward and welcome Qin Yu into the tent. This in itself proved that his status was quite eye-catching amongst the guards. All of these matters superimposed upon each other. It was doomed that Wu Tongtian would never be able to extricate himself from this matter. As the saying went, if a basin of yellow mud was poured into the crotch of one's trousers, the result would be the same. But now, as long as one witnessed the assassination from start to finish, they wouldn't believe that this was really Wu Tongtian's doing. Even if Wu Tongtian wanted to kill someone, he wouldn't be so stupid as to use such a method. Whether he succeeded or not, he would still be caught up in it. Of course, thoughts were just thoughts. Besides Wu Tongtian's trusted aides in the commander's tent, no one would reveal their thoughts. As for what the truth of the matter was, it was still hard to say. After all, who here hadn't experienced the tactic of injuring oneself to gain the confidence of others and hiding under the lamp? Watch more and speak less. Since this matter had nothing to do with them, they might as well sit back and watch, lest they be drawn into the turbulent undercurrents. However, even though this was the case, for a dignified Marquis General to be assassinated outside the commander's tent, no matter who the mastermind was, they had displayed sufficient madness. This caused all of the generals present to feel a chill rise in their hearts. Strife for power, struggles in the open and in the dark, and even life and death battles were common in the army. But to disregard the rules and act in such a cruel and brutal manner, this still crossed the bottom line of any struggle. Perhaps it was an exaggeration to say that everyone was in danger, but in the future it was inevitable that they would be more cautious and careful. Qin Yu scattered his aura and cupped his hands together towards Wu Tongtian. I naturally believed the words of the great marshal. Then, I ask you to clearly investigate this matter. After a brief pause, he smiled and said, I will wait in the commander's tent for the result. The atmosphere suddenly tensed up. Marquis Zhongwu, who had already revealed his sharpness, used these words to display his tough attitude once more. But he was already in reason, and now he had been assassinated. Although he was strong and rude, no one dared to say anything. Of course, there were also some who hid on the side to watch the fun. In the army, each person had their own position. Only by causing a ruckus would there be a chance of a vacancy opening up for them. After all, water flowed to the low places and people walked to the high places. This was an instinct. Wu Tongtian frowned for a moment before immediately composing himself. Good. Everyone returned to the commander's tent. As the commander issued the order, there was a moment of chaos. All those who had dealings with the assassin were temporarily detained and interrogations were being carried out. The first thing they obtained was information about the assassin's background. According to the records of the army, the assassin was called Gao Yu. He had been in the army for over 100 years and had always bravely killed his enemies. He had made many meritorious contributions, and after being investigated, he had been promoted to guard the commander's tent. As for Gao Yu, he had served in the commander's tent for over 10 years. He had always been diligent and had never made any mistakes. 3 years ago, in a great war with the barbarians, he had defended the commander's flag. He had fought to the death without retreating and had sustained over 30 wounds. Afterwards, he had received a reward. Of course, now that the fact that Gao Yu was an assassin had been exposed, this reward had become even more glaring. The assistant officers responsible for investigating the merits of the army and reporting them had pale faces. They faced the interrogators and complained that they had been wronged. After all, Gao Yu was indeed a soldier worthy of praise in the army. Who would have thought that he was an assassin? A ruler realm expert was actually willing to hide deep within the army for 100 years, never revealing the slightest trace of his true identity. It was hard to imagine. Gao Yu's background was extremely clean, and everything about him could be investigated. But it was clear that the real Gao Yu had likely died. To a ruler, impersonating someone else was a very simple matter. The interrogators would continue to investigate this matter. They had to find the unlucky bastard that had suffered the wrath of the commander's tent. But this wasn't the main direction. The interrogators continued to investigate Gao Yu's family and friends. But it was clearly written on his background that all of his family members had died in a great war between the barbarians and the desolate lands. Thus he had joined the army. Although he had a few friends, none of them knew anything about him. Of course, the interrogators carrying out military law wouldn't judge them as ignorant just because they said a few words or cried out that they were wronged. They had their own verification procedures. Seeing that no one in the commander's tent had any objections to the results of this interrogation, they knew that this verification procedure was indeed reliable. Whether it was bloody or anything else, it wasn't within the scope of the commander's tense attention. The investigation fell into an impasse. This was because no matter how they looked, they couldn't find any flaws. They couldn't find out Gao Yu's motive or who was pulling the strings behind the scenes. Looking at the Marquis Zhongwu Ningqin sitting across from Yi Sengdu in the commander's tent, calmly drinking tea, as if he didn't care about the impasse in front of him, everyone sighed inwardly. In the countless years of the Western Border Army, this person in front of them was the first person that could act so forcefully in front of Commander Wu. Since Marquis Zhongwu didn't give up, Commander Wu fell silent for a moment and then ordered them to continue digging. Luckily, this deadlock didn't continue for too long. A turning point soon appeared. It turned out that the interrogators had grasped a key point from the interrogation. Gao Yu liked to drink wine. This was something that others had also said. When he wasn't on duty, he liked to drink alone. To cultivators, as long as they grasped the proper limits, drinking wine wasn't a great taboo. But for Gao Yu, who had already been promoted to guard the commander's tent and had a bright future ahead of him, continuing to drink wine seemed a bit inappropriate. Of course, this could also be explained as Gao Yu having no ambitions and didn't want to climb to a high position in the army. Or perhaps he was addicted to alcohol and didn't want to give it up, and so on and so forth. There were many reasons, but to the interrogators of the army, if they found something suspicious, they had to investigate it. Any small gap could become the beginning of the destruction of the entire levy. What Gao Yu liked to drink the most was a coarse brew called black iron wine. The wine was as spicy as its name suggested. It was produced 1,000 miles away from the border army camp, in a small city called Ironthorn. The interrogators rushed to Ironthorn City and found the workshop that produced the black iron wine. They took control of everyone there, and soon a woman who sold the wine appeared in the interrogators' line of sight. The reason was simple. This woman's appearance wasn't bad, and her white flesh was even rarer. In this small city on the border, she could be considered one of the top women. At the start, the interrogation didn't go smoothly. The woman cried and wiped away her tears. She only said that although she did have a few casual affairs with a man in the army called Gaoyu, it was hard for her to control herself. But first, she was a woman, and after her husband died, it was inevitable that she would feel lonely. Second, the man was tall and muscular, making it hard for her to control herself. But this wasn't against the law. There was no law in the Western wasteland that said a widowed woman couldn't occasionally steal a few bites. Meat and vegetables really weren't good enough, and it was hard to eat salt and oil. Chapter 1610. Luckily, the methods of the military interrogators weren't something that ordinary officials could compare with. It was unknown what sort of trick they used to touch this woman's sore spot. Women might be stubborn, but once they gave themselves away, their mentality would collapse even more. In a fit of anger, she blurted out many things. She didn't even miss out on the several times they had made love with each other. The two interrogators who were sitting opposite her and listening to her in detail had cold expressions on their faces. They didn't have any intention of interrupting her, and only stopped when she spoke until her throat was smoking. According to what this woman said, she had taken the initiative to seduce that man from the military named Gaoyu after receiving a large sum of money. As time passed, the two of them became entangled together. TSK, this woman is really interesting. I like her. After organizing the questions, the two interrogators turned and left. After they left the room, one of them slowly spoke up. Even though his face was still cold, his eyes were blazing with passion. The other interrogator frowned. He reminded him, "This woman is now one of the key points. Don't touch her. Don't worry, I won't be so stupid as to seek my own death. Even if I covet her body, I will wait until this matter comes to an end." The other interrogator thought for a moment and nodded, no longer saying anything. They had done similar things many times before. As long as they were careful, there wouldn't be any trouble. Following that, they captured the person who had given the money to this woman. This matter didn't go smoothly. That fellow named Wang Kai seemed to have sensed something and fled ahead of time. The interrogators sealed off the Wang family. After a careful investigation, they found a breakthrough on a maid. They captured Wang Kai, who was hiding in a courtyard within Ironthorn City. This fellow was quite straightforward. He said that he wanted to develop the industry left behind by his ancestors in order to curry favor with the nobles in the military. So, when he found out that Gaoyu was a guard at Commander Gaoyu's tent, he sent money to that woman in the restaurant. Both sides cooperated, and each took what they needed. The interrogators used various methods, and the answer was always the same. Wang Kai, who was in so much pain that he didn't even look like a human anymore, clenched his teeth and said, "Don't torture me. Just tell me who you want me to bite. I will definitely agree." At this point, they really couldn't use torture anymore. Otherwise, even if they obtained results later on, they would attract trouble. The investigation reached a deadlock once again. The breakthrough came from the maidservant of the Wang family. Perhaps it was because she had betrayed the Wang family and believed that she had no chance of survival, so she was afraid of being retaliated against. She gave an important clue. Wang Kai had a half-sister who had come to the Wang family in her early years. She was dressed well and had guards by her side. The words armored guards were used well. They were precise and inconspicuous. The interrogator glanced at this rather beautiful maid who must have crawled into Wang Kai's bed a long time ago. A sharp light flashed in his eyes. His intuition told him that there was a problem, but after thinking about it, he just recorded the information in a book and did not continue to investigate. since they were ordered to investigate the assassination of the Marquis of Loyal Marshal Ningqin. It was best not to complicate matters. After all, although the interrogators in the army were directly under the Empire's military headquarters and were not under the control of the border army camp, they were not under the control of the border army camp, but under the eaves of others. If they didn't want to be blown by the wind and beaten by the rain, they didn't want to inexplicably lose their lives one day. They had to be flexible when necessary. After reporting to the commander's tent, the interrogators continued to investigate. Wang Kai's half-sister was quickly found after a thorough investigation. Her identity was indeed not ordinary. She was the beloved concubine of the Roaring Tiger Army's deputy general of the Western Border Army Camp. As for the Roaring Tiger Army, it had been many years. Ever since Yi Sangdu entered the Western Border Army Camp, he had always been one of his direct subordinates. These past years, he had carefully managed the army. From top to bottom, he could be said to be a trusted aide of the great general. As for this Deputy General Su Zhou, he was also known to be a trusted aide of the Yi family. The commander's tent fell deathly silent. Yi Sangda's complexion paled. He clenched his teeth and roared. "This matter has nothing to do with me. I asked the great general to investigate." The shock and anger he showed didn't seem to be fake. But when one's acting skills reached a transcendent level, it was difficult to determine whether it was real or fake. Qin Yu lowered his head and drank his tea. His eyes flashed. Of everyone present today, Yi Sangda's background had already determined that he was indeed the one who wished for Qin Yu to die here the most. But for some reason, his intuition told him that Yi Sangda's current appearance wasn't fake. Who exactly was the assassin working for? Wu Tongtian was expressionless. "Great General, there is no need to be angry. The interrogators have only found some clues. Perhaps all of this is just a coincidence. Let them continue to investigate. Perhaps the truth will come to light and we can give the great general an explanation." Yi Sangdu's heart skipped a beat. He looked up at the calm Wu Tongtian and felt a chill run down his spine. After receiving the commander's order, the interrogators rushed towards the Roaring Tiger Army. Deputy General Su Zhou ordered his guards to withdraw. He looked at the interrogators with a calm expression. "I can go with you, but this matter has nothing to do with me." The interrogators bowed. "General Su, rest assured that we will investigate this thoroughly. We won't make any rash decisions. But for now, I ask that you come with us first." Su Zhou nodded, his expression calm. "Very well." He turned and ordered his subordinates to maintain order in the army and not cause any trouble. In the commander's tent, Yi Sangdu stood up and left. In his words, since he was suspected, it wasn't appropriate for him to stay here any longer. He should return to his own tent and wait for the results. Wu Tongtian didn't stop him. Watching Yi Sangdu leave at this time, in the depths of the general's eyes, there were some emotional changes. Suppressing his emotions, Yi Sangdu calmly left the commander's tent. He could feel these gazes coming from behind him. He became increasingly annoyed, but he acted as if he didn't feel anything. He strode back to his tent. He had to investigate as soon as possible. He had to find out whether or not Su Zhou was truly involved. Today, Wu Tongtian gave him an extremely bad feeling. If something really happened to him, the consequences would be unimaginable. In the great general's tent, there were already trusted aides anxiously waiting. Seeing Yi Sangdu return, they were overjoyed. They hurried forwards and bowed. "Great General, what should we do? Su Zhou has already been exposed. I fear something big is about to happen." Yi Sangdu's complexion paled as he glared at them. Seeing this expression, the aide's heart shrank. He said with a trembling voice, "Does the great general not know the inside story?" At this time, Yi Sangdu wanted to strangle this aide to death. He clenched his teeth and roared out, "Just what is going on here?" The aide's complexion paled and he tottered. Looking at the great general's eyes that seemed as if they could eat him alive, He knew that if he fainted now, he wouldn't be able to wake up again. He slapped himself in the face and forcefully raised his spirits. Great General, 14 years ago, it was Mr. Second who personally looked for me and arranged for Galliu, a chess piece of the previous dynasty. Because this is an important matter. There are very few people who know of this matter. After I finished, I reported back. The great general personally told me that he understood. Otherwise, how could I have dared to make such a decision on my own? Li Sangde's thoughts raced. He had a photographic memory. As a cultivator, he was able to quickly find some memories from 14 years ago. He closed his eyes, his complexion becoming increasingly ugly. Back then, I was misled by him and thought that you were doing something else. Men, go and ask Mr. Second to come over. I want to ask him why he did this. For him to be fooled by someone and casually use one of his subordinates to create a plot against him. The premise was that Li Sangdu had enough trust in this Mr. Second. And in truth, when he left the imperial capital and rushed to the border army, he hadn't done anything wrong in all these years. This was mostly because of Mr. Second's schemes. Thinking of this, Li Sangdu was startled and filled with dread. He felt a chill seep out from the depths of his heart, so much so that even his blood seemed to freeze. The guards outside the tent received orders and left in a hurry. They soon returned, but all they brought back was an ice-cold corpse. Great General, when I arrived, Mr. Second had already committed suicide. This is the letter he left for you. Li Sangdu looked at the calm and familiar face in front of him. He thought back to several days ago when he was dealing with Marquis Ningqin, and the two of them had a conversation. At that time, Mr. Second hadn't revealed any abnormalities at all. He had calmly communicated with him and made many suggestions. For instance, he had told him to wait and see for the time being. He couldn't recklessly attack Marquis because he was under pressure from the imperial capital. At that time, Li Sangdu never imagined that the Mr. Second in front of him, who he respected so much, would have already buried a great calamity for him 14 years ago. Li Sangdu picked up the letter and tore open the seal. After glancing at it several times, his complexion became increasingly pale. On the letter was written in a terrified scrawl. He admitted that he had made a great mistake and didn't dare to accept military punishment. He could only choose to commit suicide to escape, and so on and so forth. He clenched his fists, and the letter crumbled to dust. But Li Sangdu knew that Mr. Second had used his own life to bite him to death. It didn't matter whether or not he had this letter. But even so, before Mr. Second committed suicide, he still wrote this letter. Li Sangdu's fingers trembled as he looked up. Go and see Suzhou. Tell him to insist on this matter. Halfway through his words, he froze. He thought of Mr. Second's level. If he was nothing more than a chess piece that could be casually discarded, then how could the person playing this game give him a chance? It's too late, it's too late. He muttered to himself, his face dejected. Li Sangdu's guess was correct. Suzhou, who had been invited into the interrogation tent, didn't even have time to show off his courage before he was directly detained. He desperately resisted. He angrily roared, How dare you? I am a deputy general of the Tiger Roar Army. How dare you torture me in private? I will definitely investigate this matter to the end and make you suffer the consequences. The several interrogators who captured him had pitiful looks on their faces. They looked at this general in front of them who was speaking such ruthless words. These gazes caused Suzhou to frown. His complexion quickly paled and his body shivered. Cold sweat dripped down his forehead. An interrogator said in a soft voice, General Su, you should know the strength of us interrogators. If there is no evidence, how could we dare to do anything to you? He shook his head and sighed. In this world, the most poisonous thing is a woman's heart. In your next life, you should open your eyes wide. Hearing these words, Suzhou felt as if his spine had been broken. He lost all of his vitality and slumped to the ground. Wang Kai's half-sister knelt in the corner of the dungeon. She kowtowed, tears streaming down her face. Mother, mother, your daughter has finally avenged you. No one in the Wang family will escape. If you know this in the afterlife, you can rest in peace. Chapter 1611. Within the commander tent, the atmosphere was extremely heavy. Although everyone had a foreboding premonition when Li Sangdu left halfway, when all the evidence was found, they still found it hard to believe, as well as a chill that surged out from the depths of their hearts. It wasn't because Yi Sangde dared to order an assassin to kill Marquis Zhongwu, Ningqin, but because today's events had gone far too smoothly. Although the army's interrogators were indeed the group of people that excelled at such private matters, their efficiency was so high that they were likely feeling a chill in their hearts, or perhaps they were cursing out loud. After all, to be used as a killing knife, especially against Yi Sangdu, wasn't something that made anyone happy. But these thoughts could only be suppressed in the depths of their hearts. This was because the chain of evidence was sufficient and conclusive. Li Sangdu was the instigator behind the scenes, ordering the remnants of the previous dynasty to act as assassins to kill Marquis Zhongwu outside the commander's tent. Whether or not this matter succeeded, if it wasn't handled properly, it would cause turmoil in the border army. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that Qin Yu's intentions were sinister. This was a truly great crime. Wu Tongtian took a deep breath and slowly said, "This matter is of great importance. Before the imperial capital makes a decision, I ask everyone to keep their mouths shut and not reveal a single word to anyone." He paused for a moment and then continued, "I will personally step forward to suppress the situation. Great General, please come to my tent and wait for the arrival of an angel." His words were like a final verdict. No one in the commander's tent was in the mood to watch the fun. Great General Yi Sangdu was finished. Although the seat was indeed empty, as they looked up at the solemn and emotionless Wu Shuai, their hearts filled with fear. In the current Western Border Army camp, those that could strike down Yi Sangdu without giving him the slightest chance to struggle were only Wu Tongtian and the silent Marquis Zhongwu. But because of time constraints, Marquis Zhongwu had been excluded from the crowd from the very beginning. Therefore, the one who had plotted for many years and defeated the dignified Yi family, the number 2 general of the Western Border Army, could only be Wu Tongtian. But why? In these past years, Wu Shuai's attitude had always been ambiguous, and he had a close relationship with the Yi family. Although the later Yi family was showing signs of being shaken by a storm, their foundation was still strong. Wu Shuai's actions were no different from shedding all pretense of cordiality. Even though he was the commander-in-chief of a border army, doing something like this was a bit too risky. Moreover, His Majesty in the Imperial Palace had always disliked Wu Tongtian. This was an almost open secret in the Western Wilderness Army. Now that His Majesty had stabilized the situation in the capital and obtained the extension of 100 years, what Wu Tongtian should do was to hug the Yi family and strive to survive this period of cold winter. He should not stab His Majesty in the back and try to change his opinion. After all, 100 years was a long life for mortals. But for grand cultivators who had almost reached the peak of the mountain, it was not a matter of flicking their fingers, but at most 4 or 5 flicks. Their future was still promising. Everyone couldn't understand what was going on. They felt that Wu Tongtian's actions were a bit of a miscalculation and muddle-headed, but it didn't lessen their fear in the slightest. Yi Sang had already said what he wanted. If it was them, if Wu Tongtian brazenly made a move, who would be better off? Marquis Zhongwu, this matter has come to an end for now. Are you satisfied? Wu Tongtian slowly said, a tired look on his face. It seemed he had exhausted a great deal of his mind today. Qin Yu put down his teacup. He cupped his hands together. Commander-in-Chief is wise and fair. I am very satisfied. He stood up. I will leave everything to Commander-in-Chief to decide. I have 400,000 men under my command, and they are still in the mines without a place to stay. I will not stay any longer and will bid my farewells first. Wu Tongtian nodded. Marquis Zhongwu can calculate the costs of building the camp and send a number to the commander-in-chief's tent. Qin Yu smiled. Thank you, commander-in-chief. He turned and walked out of the tent. Today seemed like a glorious day, but thinking about it, there were many interesting things. He had come with the momentum of a thunderstorm to demand an explanation from the commander-in-chief. Although the final result was good, no matter how he looked at it, he felt that he had been used as a knife in someone else's hand. He was a bit unhappy and a bit afraid, but he was even more satisfied. After all, pushing down Yi Sangdu was a good thing for Qin Yu no matter how he looked at it. Thinking about it, Wu Tongtian had already calculated all of this. He knew that Qin Yu would be willing to cooperate and wouldn't jump out to mess with him. That was why he said those last words just now, which could be considered as giving him some face. Marquis Zhongwu, wait a moment. A shout came from behind him. Zhao Chong hurriedly chased after him, a smile on his face. I haven't had the chance to congratulate Lord Marquis on his promotion. Why are you leaving so soon? I've just obtained a pot of good tea in my tent. Marquis, you must come and have a taste. You must not refuse. Now that there are so many people watching, I will lose face. At this point, it seemed like Zhao Chong had truly been frightened by the commotion in the commander's tent today. Although Qin Yu didn't care about Zhao Chong's face, he still nodded after thinking about it. That's fine. Everything about Marshall's tent is good, but the tea for guests is a bit lacking. Let's go to General Zhao's tent and drink some tea before leaving. Zhao Chong was overjoyed. He gestured with his hand. Marquis, do me the honor. Please. His attitude was extremely humble. As they spoke, Qin Yu mostly responded and didn't say much. As for this General Zhao, he was indeed a wonderful person. From time to time he would laugh and even gather his courage to pat Qin Yu's shoulder, as if they were very close. He wished that everyone in the camp could see this with their own eyes. After entering the tent, Zhao Chong waved his hands to dismiss his attendants. Zhao Chong personally brewed a pot of tea and poured it 80% full for Qin Yu. He placed it in front of him. I was only doing this to protect myself. I hope that you don't mind me for borrowing Lord Marquis' banner. Qin Yu faintly smiled. He felt that this Zhao Chong was more and more interesting. He could even lower his head and admit his mistakes without any hesitation. Thinking for a moment, he picked up the teacup and took a sip. General Zhao, just what do you want to say? Say it now. I really only want a cup of tea. A moment later, Zhao Chong smiled and personally saw Qin Yu off. He stood at the entrance of the tent and waved his hand. It wasn't until Qin Yu's back vanished from sight that he turned back. His personal guards Wang Dadu and the others were waiting not too far away from the tent. As they saw their general arrive, they hurried to greet him. Qin Yu glanced at them and smiled. Come, let's return to the mine. He sat in the carriage and comfortably leaned against the soft couch. Qin Yu let out a deep breath, a thoughtful look in his eyes. When he was in Zhao Chong's tent, he had straightforwardly expressed that he was willing to follow Qin Yu's lead in the future. He only hoped that the Marquis would allow him to join them so that he could shelter them from the wind and rain in the future. Although Qin Yu appreciated Zhao Chong's decisiveness, he was still one of the top-ranked generals of the border army. This sort of behavior was a bit too impatient and crude, and it would be appropriate to say that it was beneath his status. However, after leaving the tent, Qin Yu's thoughts raced, and he guessed what was going on. Zhao Chong had hurriedly rushed out of the tent, not even caring about his face. The reason he had pulled him over to drink a cup of tea. Zhao Chong guessed that Wu Tongtian was one of His Majesty's people. No one was an idiot. If Wu Tongtian was able to sit in the barracks of the Western Border Army and command the millions upon millions of soldiers of the Empire, he was naturally one of the smartest people in the world. His cultivation wasn't just for show. So, although it seemed like he was brainless and muddle-headed, this betrayal of a friend for glory, stabbing a knife in the back in an attempt to obtain His Majesty's approval, there had to be a deeper meaning behind it. if Wu Tongtian had always been one of His Majesty's people, then all of this could be explained in a reasonable manner. The so-called ruler and minister disliking each other was nothing more than a play that had been played out for many years. Because both sides had superb acting skills, they had fooled everyone. Now that His Majesty had made it clear that he wanted to move against the Yi family, it was only natural that Wu Tongtian would act as the vanguard and take down Yi Sang. This was why Zhao Chong was so impatient to obtain Qin Yu's protection, because he was also one of His Majesty's people. In other words, according to Zhao Chong's guess, after Yi Sang fell, the number 1 Wu Tongtian and number 2 Marquis Loyal Marshal were fellow disciples of the same sect. In the future, if they wanted to deal with someone or send someone to hell, wouldn't that be a matter of a single word? Within the carriage, Qin Yu let out a long breath. He rubbed his temples. He had to admit that what Zhao Chong was thinking was indeed a possibility. From the very start, the Western Wasteland Great Emperor had never trusted him. This was already certain. Thus, it was possible that he had concealed Wu Tongtian's true background from Qin Yu so that he could secretly monitor and impede him. Qin Yu had smoothly passed the tests of the Noble South and Golden Millet realms. Although his memories were blurry, he could at least confirm this. Otherwise, it would have been impossible for him to safely arrive at the border army barracks. Thus, if Wu Tongtian really did act this time on the orders of the Western Wasteland Great Emperor, then once the dust settled, he should have taken the initiative to come and inform Qin Yu. Shaking his head, Qin Yu no longer thought about this. To him, it wasn't important who Wu Tongtian was. After all, the identity he had now was fake. In addition, the Western Wasteland Great Emperor had always been wary of him for some unknown reason. Perhaps there would come a day when Qin Yu would be forced to flee. Thinking about this was useless. It was better to cultivate. Otherwise, when the time came, he wouldn't be able to run away even if he wanted to. Thus, after sorting out his thoughts, Qin Yu closed his eyes and sat down cross-legged. Outside the carriage, Wang Dadu and the others felt the changes in the Marquis's aura. They all revealed looks of admiration. They thought that their Marquis was truly someone with a thumbs up. With his current status and cultivation, he still cultivated so painstakingly, not wasting any time at all. Compared to the Marquis, us lowly peasants in the border army are just wasting away our time. We deserve to be slapped in the face. Wang Dada took a deep breath. He turned his head, his dark eyes sweeping over the people around him. His gaze paused on his nephew Wang San for a moment. He lowered his voice and said, "Once we return to the mine and hand over the task, I will personally urge you all to work hard in your cultivation. Otherwise, even if the Marquis thinks highly of us, I fear we won't have the face to accept him if he continues to make us his personal guards." Everyone had bitter expressions. They thought back to when the Marquis had faced 2 assassinations in the imperial capital and then outside the commander's tent. They hadn't played any role at all and had been nothing more than decorations. They all revealed ashamed expressions and nodded. They clenched their teeth. For better or worse, they had to work hard. Even if they couldn't help the Marquis stand on his own, they had to at least be like the 2 fourth claws that had died in the palace. When the enemy arrived, they could help the Marquis resist a bit. Chapter 1612. Mine Cave. After arranging arrangements for the 400,000 soldiers, Qin Yu let out a long breath. He thought that being a person of status was also a tiring matter. Luckily, his ambition wasn't to be a qualified general. He just needed to deal with everything that came his way, but he needed to do his best. True Saint Baitu was a good choice. He had the bloodline of an imperial family and was the nephew of the Skyborn King. He was an elite that had been carefully raised since he was a child. If he wasn't properly ordered around, it would be a waste. Qin Yu called him over and gave him a few instructions. Then, without giving him a chance to refute or struggle, he waved his hand and sent him away. As true Saint Baitu walked out, he rubbed his face. Just what was going on? The mine cave had an army of 600,000 soldiers, and yet they were handing over the daily chores to him? He looked down at the still warm Marquis Loyal Marshal's letter of acceptance. He wanted to cry, but no tears came out. Temporary military affairs counselor. Marquis, are you sure that there is such a strange official position in the Western desolate border army? It was fine if he wanted to slack off, but for better or worse, he had to put in some effort. As he thought of all the things he would have to do next, he wanted to pull out his hair. After dealing with true Saint Bai Tu, Qin was in a good mood. He continued to cultivate, but he was also hesitant about taking a trip to the mine cave. After thinking for a moment, Qin shook his head. He wouldn't be able to hide from her sooner or later. Since he had to let her know, he had to do it sooner rather than later. Otherwise, it wouldn't be sincere enough. Qin stood up and walked towards the rear courtyard of the mansion. After news of his promotion to Marquis Loyal Marshal was sent back to the mine cave, the army station there had clearly made plans for the mansion and expanded it. The scale was several times larger than before, and it was even more luxurious. For instance, there were sun essence stones embedded into the stone walls that acted as suns. Each one was the size of a millstone, and they shined in all directions, revealing the style of an immortal cave dwelling. Of course, it was impossible for the peasants of the border army to find such good things. But not too long ago, the high-spirited Zhou Defu had brought several of his trusted subordinates back to the border army from the imperial capital. When he learned that the mine guards were preparing to open up a mansion for the Marquis, he immediately took over. It was not a secret that the Marquis was involved in smuggling with the barbarians. The border soldiers in the mine were used to this and did not find it hard to accept. After confirming Zhou Dafu's identity, he accepted them with a face full of smiles. Later on, he realized that it was indeed right to leave professional matters to professionals. In terms of enjoyment and luxury, Zhou Dafu was a master. Of previously, when Zhou Defu paid his respects to Qin, he was extremely respectful and offered him a storage ring with both hands. Inside the ring was Qin share of the smuggled goods from last time. Of course, it was 30% more than usual. Moreover, Zhou Defu paid for the construction of the mansion out of his own pocket. He was now fawning over Qin, wishing that he could tie himself to the Marquis's thigh. In the end, it was because Zhou Defu and the others had witnessed the true might and tyrannical might of the Zhongwu Marquis. Originally, they had been trembling in fear, worried that the great figures of the imperial capital would kill them in a fit of anger. But when they saw them, their attitudes were so good that they didn't even try to make things difficult for them. Instead, they easily separated the matter from the past. From now on, the mountains were high and the rivers were wide. They no longer needed to tremble in fear as if they were treading on thin ice. While they were ecstatic, there was also a bit more awe in their hearts. Such a thigh was placed in front of them, so why didn't they hurry up and grab onto it? Had their brains rusted, or had they been kicked by a donkey? The smart Zhou Defu certainly wouldn't do something so stupid. However, the mansion was too large, and the disadvantage was that it took time to walk. After all, it wasn't good to use supernatural powers to travel back and forth at home. As for Qin, this trip had delayed his cultivation. He silently thought about how much cultivation time he had wasted. As he looked at the mansion in front of him, he wasn't in a good mood. At the same time, he had a much worse impression of that Zhou Defu who had nearly clung onto his thigh and flattered him. In all honesty, Zhou Defu dared to slap his chest and swear that when he built this mansion, he put even more effort into it than when he bought a mansion for his father and mother. If he knew that he had ended up in such a miserable state because of Qin, he feared he would have cried out in aggrievement. The residence that Little Meat had chosen was the largest and most magnificent one in the backyard. There was a sun essence stone that was as big as 2 millstones embedded in the ceiling. Under the illumination of the stone, the entire place shone with brilliant colors. It truly displayed the grandeur of a noble clan. Qin stepped in. The maids bowed and bowed. His eyes swept over a white robe, and he waved his hand. "You may all leave." The maids bowed and excused themselves. Baiji was the last to leave. She glanced at Qin. Little Meat was drinking tea and eating the exquisite pastries on her plate. When everyone left, she looked up at Chinyu. "What are you looking for me for? I just rested for a day or two. Can't you calm down a bit?" Chinyu rubbed his nose. He couldn't blame Little Meat for having such a bad attitude. It was just as she said. Most of the time he came here, nothing good would come out of it. He would always add to her troubles. He lightly coughed and said, "The reason I came here this time is to take you to a place, of course. I might need some suggestions from you." Little Meat glanced at Chinyu. Her eyes were bright, as if she could see through his heart. She finished eating the pastries in her hands and then lifted a foot to step on the ground. Chinyu thought to himself that he had expected this. He nodded. Little Meat licked the corners of her lips. Seeing her actions, Chinyu inexplicably felt flustered. He suddenly felt a bit of regret. The decision he made just now, could it be that he had let a wolf into the house? Humph! Little Meat coldly sneered. She clenched her teeth. Leading a wolf into the house? "I didn't think you would have such literary talent, Chinyu. To use this phrase here, I have to say, it really is quite appropriate." Chinyu felt a headache coming on. He quickly suppressed these thoughts. No, it was just a subconscious thought. Sometimes these things really can't be controlled. What sort of relationship do we have? Of course, I have complete confidence in you. Little Meat coldly sneered. She lowered her head and drank some tea. "Forget it. I think it's best if I don't take this trip. I don't want you to worry about me in the future and suspect me over and over again." Chinyu stood up and grabbed her hand. He turned and walked outside. "Don't. I admit my mistake. I have no conscience. Miss Little Meat, a great person like you will forgive me." Little Meat's eyebrows arched up. She looked down and saw Chinyu grabbing her hand. He coldly snorted, but his eyes softened. After half refusing and half agreeing, she was pulled away by Chinyu. They left the mansion and casually chose a tunnel. Without alerting anyone, they flashed in. In the pitch-black underground, the tunnels extended in all directions. The two of them continued downwards, passing through countless crisscrossing tunnels that seemed like a maze. Luckily, Chinyu had a feeling in his heart, so he didn't need to think about anything. Finally, they arrived at the Ghost Fog Grotto. Chinyu let go of her hand. He turned and smiled. "We've arrived." Little Meat grunted. She tried to keep her voice as calm as possible, not revealing any of her inner emotions. Chinyu glanced at her, feeling a little strange. Before he could think about it, Little Meat coldly sneered. "What are you doing? What a waste of time." This was Little Meat's normal state. Chinyu reached out a hand and gestured. "Miss Little Meat, please follow me." He stepped inside. The moment Little Meat entered, a great panic rose up in Chinyu's mind. In the next moment, the space and time laws within the grotto fell into a berserk state. It was like a sea in a storm, chaotic and disorderly.